Anyway, so yeah, I guess if we just give a formal beginning to this conversation. Well, thanks, Frank. Thanks for spending some time here and being willing to chat with me. Just I guess for some context, maybe we give a brief glimpse of who we are, why we're even having this conversation. Like for me, I'm one just excited to be able to speak to, know, and share, people that are also interested in this. And we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and it was just very, to me, it's very exciting, and there's this like sense of camaraderie in this that's very just joyful to be able to do, as well as the motivation of as of course everything that we're going to talk about has very much transformed my life, I would say, kind of for the better in a very pleasant
Mhm.
way. So it ends up being something that you just want to speak about and
Sure.
share in case this ends up also being for somebody that which it was for you from somebody else. So
Mhm.
hence us doing this call and having a conversation and recording it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think another thing is that we're both artists. You make films. Obviously, you have a film on Netflix, which I loved. Yeah, and then that's how we got connected. I think you're like, "Hey, check out my film on Netflix." I was like, "Oh, interesting." And I looked at it. I was like, "Okay, cool." And then you had a conversation with me about non-duality, meditation, about your path, and I think that intensive desire to not just want to find out about the nature of reality, nature of mind, the nature of self, but also that inclination to share, right? Because it's almost like you see a good movie and you want other people to see it. That's why you make films, right? You're like, whatever, if it's your own movie, there is a story that you want to tell and you want other people to see it. And there is a transmission in sitting in the movie theater and receiving the film. It's like you're inside the director's mind and the director's inside your mind, right? And I think meditation is also very much like this, right? You have this incredible experience. Well, mm, it becomes a moment to moment lived thing, right? There are experiences, but ultimately it transcends all experiences, but it includes experiences too, the highs and the low. But then you do get this dramatic shift in your consciousness, in your baseline consciousness, in your perception, in how you process emotions, even in how you relate with thoughts and your body, mind, character, everything like that. So it is a dramatic shift. But then some tradition would say that there is nothing to seek. You
mm,
are that which you are seeking for. So you are really just discovering or revealing what's always and already the case, like your true nature, which is that which is always already like awake and
yeah.
vast and spacious and present. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. When you said about the sharing and like when you watch a good movie, what came up for me is kind of like dancing. Like dancing
Mm,
is amazing, but sometimes you're just like, come dance with me. And it's like if
yeah,
somebody is a bit contracted and on it like it doesn't want to dance and let go, and you're just like, come on. It's great to dance. There is
yeah.
this kind of sharing because you know, dancing by oneself is great in and of itself, but there's just something to
Mm.
also being able to dance with others. It's kind of really lovely.
Yeah, and one of the insights that you receive from meditation is that nothing stands alone, right? Right?
Mm.
And there's nothing in the universe that's alone. Even if you think you're alone, you're connected by, infinite webs and infinite webs of like cause and conditioning, right? Everything is interpenetrating each other. Everything is interconnected. So this is intensive like inclination to just want to connect not just with other beings, but with reality itself. And
Yeah, it's
that's
like
why I think the deep inner meditation brings you is like this intimate with a million things, kind of embodied feeling.
indeed. So I think for starting off and what we were talking about in terms of even just going back to very basics, like what is meditation? What is it for? I've been speaking to
Mm.
people and I ask people to send me in questions about, and a lot of it I think is a good starting point because I think there could be many ideas of what meditation is. You get questions like, when I go jogging, that's my meditation, or they're like, is that meditating? Or
Mm.
I do journaling for meditation, or for me it's dancing, or somebody's like, I try to meditate, but I can't get rid of thoughts, so I'm not meditating yet. So I think there's, if we can just speak to a bit of like what
What
is
is meditation?
meditating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a broad term, right? Because like a lot of people are getting into mindfulness nowadays, right? With like waking up app, headspace and things like that. But I think if you want to ask the question, what is meditation? It's also kind of important to recognize what meditation is for. There can be different functions to meditations, right? So like, what is it for? Like, what about you? Like, how did you get started in meditation? And what about the majority of the people that you talk to? Um, if they think of meditation and they find that interesting, what is it to them? Like, what do they want to get out of meditation? I think that is important to distinguish
So
for most people,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I guess and I think it'll be fun to speak and whenever I listen to conversation, it's always great to hear people's like own personal journey and direct experience. So I get it in my case, and I think from what I hear that there's always a gravitation towards the contemplative traditions and that through suffering. So just essentially I'm dissatisfied with my life, like "Ugh, this stress, that this anxiety is overwhelming, or I feel like I have this potential that I haven't quite accessed and I feel stuck, like that kind of thing that it's seeking
Mm,
some way, some tools. I think we're seeking a lot of tools nowadays with like therapy or something like how do I manage this? How do I become fully myself? I think there's these
there we
instincts,
go. Yeah.
intuitions,
Yeah.
inclinations how to become more fully yourself or like this open
Mm,
um and I think that leads us so in a way there's a framing in which you could see almost suffering as the best thing which pulls us towards that because it
mm,
doesn't feel good to be there and so it allows you to push you towards seeking so I think there's definitely dissatisfaction plays a large role in aiming intentionality in
mm.
terms of seeking meditation. So, and then you get a broad range. It's like, oh, is meditation just supposed to have an empty mind so
Watch
the
the
thoughts
breath.
won't bother me anymore, or just be present? And that also gets very nebulous. Like, so how are you?
Mm,
What does it mean to really be present here,
yeah. Yeah.
paying attention? Um, and I think in my personal case, there was the extra side of like I studied philosophy in college, so I've always had that also abstract theoretical thinking inclination of curiosity. Like what is like that was my also day to day listening to podcasts and YouTube, like what is consciousness? Looking into the
Mm,
neuroscience behind it, also quantum physics and cosmology of like, oh, what are subatomic particles and electrons are like excitations of a quantum field, so they're not necessarily so that kind of like trying to keep dissecting reality, though now looking back, it was still very cognitive and still very just intellectual rather than experiential. But there was this inclination of just absolute curiosity to the nature of being, nature of reality. All these philosophers are a lot of them really trying to get at that. So I think both
yeah.
those things really converged for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Same actually. I was also interested in the mind as well. You know, I also read a lot of philosophy, and then I started making art when I was 5, and I played violin, and ultimately I got into like filmmaking and things like that, photography, sculpture. So I was always using these different endeavors to not just enhance my creativity, but to investigate what is the nature of this, what is the nature of experience, or you can say the nature of reality or the nature of self. Because I think everybody who is alive have probably asked that question, right? Who am I? What am I? What is this? And if you go into the deeper end of it in philosophy, what is consciousness? What is giving you this, subjective experience? And what is thought? What is your moment-to-moment experience or reality prior to thoughts, even? So these are the fundamental questions that I think every human beings ask, and meditation can really give you those answers in a level where it's not just intellectual or conceptual, it's embodied. Like you get a visceral and sensorial sense of this is what experience is at the most fundamental level, right? The true nature of experience, the true nature of mind, and the true nature of reality. But on the other side of it, which they're not exclusive, is happiness, right? People want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. In fact, they try to make more money. Even creativity, they try to be more creative. They can make more art, maybe get some approval, or creating something aesthetic and connect people together using their art. Or even people who go to parties, right? They drink alcohol and they fall in love. They want to be happy. But then to me, happiness is this ability to unify experience, right? We want to feel whole, right? That's why we fall in love, right? We get a romantic partner in order to feel whole with another person. And even when we go out to drink, right? We drink alcohol in a party with a group of friends because we want to connect, right? We go to nature, we walk around in nature. People love nature. Why? Because in nature, maybe there's a less a sense of separation when you're just walking around in the wild, right? You feel whole, you feel quote unquote one with everything. Um, so I would say happiness is one of them, and freedom, right? People want to be free. They want to not be bonded by suffering or dissatisfaction, right? They want to be their most authentic self, be truly who they are. So I think those reasons are good enough for people to start meditating. And I will even venture to say that meditation prepares you to die, right? Sam Harris says meditation is preparing you for like the worst day of your life or at the worst moment of your life. That's going to come, right? Whether that's the death of a family or even very small things, right? From like, I don't know, dropping a cup of coffee on the floor during a meeting or losing your family or your dog, right? Or even your own death, right? That's the inevitable, right? But learning to die is co-arising with learning to live, right? So meditation is really the art of life, right? Because you can say meditation is mind training. That's another way I'll put it. It's mind training. It's training the mind, which is no different than training the body physically, right? Because one of the insight is the body and the mind are also not separate, and the body mind is also not separate from reality itself. So if meditation is mind training, then it's also a life training. And if you're alive, then you should be interested in meditation because everything is life. Yeah, yeah. So that's a pretty good sales pitch for people who
Yeah,
want to
I
get
was
into
literally
meditation.
going to say that's a sales pitch for meditation. It's like if you are alive and breathing, therefore,
Yeah. And if you believe that we're gonna die, we're probably are, you're all probably gonna die, even if you believe in reincarnation or things like that. This physical body will deteriorate through entropy and things like that. So if you are the type of person who think about death, meditation can really help you discover the deathless. That doesn't mean that you're not gonna die, but you actually at the deeper end of it. It transcends even the duality between like life and death, existence and non-existence. But that's at the deep end. We can
yeah.
slowly unpack that. Yeah, but like, my point is, if you're interested in life, then you are interested in death and vice versa. Even if you don't admit it to yourself that I'm actually thinking about death all the time. Death is what motivates us to do most things. So if you're interested in the life, death, duality, existence, non-existence, meditation would bring those dualities or any dualities together: mind, body, self, other, subject, object, and so we can what feel whole, right? So we can be the totality of our being.
I think there was, I'm sure there's a quote somewhere from somebody who said that all art is a contemplation on death, something like that. Like if you fundamentally,
Totally.
but wait,
Yeah.
that remind, I want to get a book because I want to pull up
Yeah, show us a book.
a quote.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's hard to contemplate ceasing without also understanding arising, right? This whole thing about like impermanence, right? Arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing. Yeah.
This well, this Rumi is,
Oh, Rumi, I don't know too much about him, but I know he's great from the
yeah,
people
yeah.
that I talk
But
to.
you
Yeah, yeah.
read stuff like this, so where it's like it's a one little short poem called Quietness, but it says, "Inside this new love, die.
Mm,
Your way
mm,
begins on the other side. Become the sky. Take an axe to the prison wall. Escape. Walk out like somebody suddenly born into color. Do it now. You're covered with thick clouds. Slide out the side. Die and be quiet. Quietness is the sure sign that you've died. Your old life was a frantic running from silence. The speechless full moon comes out now." Like,
I love that. Yeah, I love how he mentions love because I know Rumi talks a lot about love, right? And that's another thing, right? Everybody wants to love and be loved. So I think meditation really allows you to love deeply, unconditionally, right? And you can't, again, you can't separate life from death. You also can separate love from life and death. To me, love, life, and death are inseparable and interconnected, right?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let's ground this to, I think, let's go very practical, immediate, when somebody's starting off, because then this stuff can, I think, start to get very sound
Abstract,
theoretical,
yeah.
although it would be like, hopefully, and I would imagine it's the same for you, we're going to try to be always talking about anything that's directly experienced rather than things
Yeah.
we've read in books and stuff that sounds poetic. It ends up sounding
Mhm.
very poetic and very, some things are like paradoxical. It's like the more no
Mm,
self you become, the more fully your true self you become. So like how, and it sounds like this poetic riddle, and yet it's somehow and a way to express that which is being experienced. But
mm.
coming back to this idea of the different notions that people have meditation, like what are you even doing? You sit down in a cushion, or do you have to sit down and just pay attention to what is that doing? What is it supposed to be doing?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Mm.
I
I
think
don't
yeah,
think you need to
if
sit
we
down.
just think of somebody who's like never meditated before, is kind of interested. Obviously, these Sam Harris waking up app and stuff like I think it's people are way more familiar, understand. They've heard of meditation, maybe interested, tried it for 5 minutes,
Mm.
too many thoughts, not for me. So to that kind
Mm.
of person, what might be like a good pointer or just basic understanding of what's going on here? What is one
Mm.
trying? to do,
Ye-
if anything
Yeah,
else?
there's so many different ways to meditate, and so you can sit down, you can even lay down, you can even walk around while meditating, right? There's active meditation, you can watch the breath, you can repeat a mantra. But I think if I can sum up with just one sentence, what meditation is to contact reality directly and intimately. So you can do that many different ways, right? There are different routings in which you can go about that. And I think ultimately meditation is about transcending even the distinction or the duality between on the cushion training, like sitting down, meditating, or different techniques, or watching the breath, whatever it is, versus your life. So eventually your life becomes meditation and vice versa. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. But then to get there, we have to sort of create a ground, a temporary ground in order to serve as a catalyst for you to, stabilize the mind, stabilize your tension, ground the mind on an object of meditations. For a lot of people, it's the breath, or maybe they bring their attention to the heart center, or they generate a feeling of loving kindness, and then the feeling of loving kindness would be the object of your meditation. Or even if they go out for a walk and they pay attention to the sensation of their footsteps walking, the wind blowing, or whatever the case may be, the sensations of your field, that could be a routing towards what contacting experience or contacting a reality directly, right? But all these different techniques, I have to emphasize, are just means to an end.
Okay.
Yeah, means to an end. Yeah, yeah.
Would you say the end, is there something that is insight based ultimately that is sort of the direction one is, because there one would ask, are you just cultivating concentration or sustained attention for
Good
the sake of
question.
itself, or is it the a means to catch insight?
Mm,
And then what does
mm,
the insight do? Is that are we trying to create a perceptual shift
mm.
versus a cognitive understanding of something, or are we trying to create a shift? And the way I was think about that is I don't know who it was that gave this example, but sort of, if you see a snake on a path and suddenly you jump out and then you look again and
Discover it's a rope.
oh, it's a stick or it's a rope. That
That's the insight
that
right there. Yeah.
that moment that it switches, then there's no going back. You can see it,
Mm,
or those images that it's a rabbit and it's a duck, and maybe at first you
yeah,
can't see it and can't see it, and it's just that at one moment, thump, oh wait, it's also a duck. The rabbit turns into a duck.
yeah.
There something occurred. It's not that you read books about how this duck, its true nature is a rabbit, and you kind of like read it 1,000 times. You're like, okay, I'm convinced because the Buddha
You
said it,
read it.
so I get no, no. At one point, it just oh, there it is. You
Yeah.
don't need the reference of literature. It helps to maybe point you and help you motivate yourself to investigate. How could it be a duck? How could it be a duck? And then
Hmm.
there's just this moment where boop, there it is, right in front of you, and it
Hmm.
seems like concentration is just a way to it might not be required for everybody. I'm sure there's prodigious people that just breathed and suddenly thought about it for a second and their consciousness exploded. But
Possibly.
I think for a lot of people, it's like if you're, if you want to understand anything, um, it would be probably beneficial to pay attention to it. So if you have like this, but your mind is doing this, it's
Yeah.
like you can maybe like, okay, it looks like it's wood, but it's brown, and then suddenly you just slow down and like, oh, wait, it's got like an edge here and it's three different
Hmm.
pieces. And it's like, actually, it's got different lines once you're here. So to do that
Hmm.
with experience itself rather than because you're never not in direct contact with what is,
Yeah.
because even distracted, like you're bouncing back and forth, and that sense of bouncingness is also a sense that, that, but can you just slow down enough so at least you arbitrarily almost solidify one to then just really observe what is it, and then it begins to unfold itself. But seems like there's a requirement of at least some level of attention to see that which is right in front of you, which is
Ye-
always here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I think another analogy is looking at a painting. So when you look at a painting in a museum, most people just see the content, right? Or you see the content, there's a little
Mhm.
boy playing next to the
Nice.
river. But then if you investigate what the nature of that painting is, you can I don't like to use the word reduce, but you can kind of shift your perspective, right, from content to context. Now you are seeing paints. You're seeing different, points that come together in order to form the perception of a boy playing next to the river. So that's an insight right there that you were just describing, right? Seeing the rabbit as a duck, right,
Mhm.
or seeing the snake as a rope. So
Mhm.
that's insight. That's the insight into the nature of experience, right? Another one is thoughts, right? A lot of people, they get into meditation because they're bombarded by thoughts. The reason why they're bombarded by thoughts is because they're believing in the content of the thoughts. They're believing in the stories that the thoughts are generating. But then if you can see those thoughts as sensations or as just mere experience, or you can see those thoughts as, the substrate of the mind, for example, then you are less likely to be pulled into the thoughts,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of grasping and clinging and attachment towards the content of the thoughts. In fact, that is a big reason why we suffer, right? We believe the content of our thoughts, but then if you can see the content of the thought as such, which is, you can say it's just sensations or luminosity or emptiness. We can get into all those terms later. But if you see the true nature of thoughts, you're not as likely to be bought in by the story or be like, grasp onto by the story, right? And then that would automatically reduce your suffering. It's kind of like watching a movie, right? You know you are watching a movie because you know you are watching a movie. And we can cry during a movie, you can feel emotional, right? But then we know that we're watching a movie. Maybe for a temporary moment that you just forgot there's a scream, but ultimately, when the scary monsters come out, you know that it's a movie. And the same thing with when you get deeper into the investigation of insight through meditation is that you realize this is all just a virtual reality. Maybe you can put it that way, right? It's mind stuff, right? You realize that all this reality that you thought was inherently real or solid is actually inherently empty. And when I say empty, I don't mean that it doesn't exist. I just mean that it doesn't have inherent existence. So that's why the analogy of, oh, it's actually just a VR goggle, a VR world that you're living in, can really be used as a metaphor to ground people in what the experience is like when the insight is seeped into your, moment to moment experience.
Mm.
And then you can actually be in the world, but not of the world. You're fully engaged, but you are not being pulled into the dream. There's way less clinging and grasping and attachment towards the content because it's an inherently empty of inherent existence. Yeah. So we've been talking about insight, but like you said, in order to arrive at the insights, for
Mhm.
most people, they probably need to ground themselves in, I guess you can say, preliminary training or stabilizing the mind. It's almost like you go into a Goenka retreat, right? So Goenka retreat, they teach you the technique called Vipassana, right? We can just start there. What Vipassana means? Vipassana means to penetrate and see clearly. So the seeing clearly part is the insight part. You want to see the nature of your experience clearly, right? The fundamental nature of your experience. But in order to do that, you have to quote unquote penetrate the experience first. And that's where, sustained attention or even concentration comes in. Because most of us, with all these different obscurations and afflictions that are in the way, it's hard for us to even have the stability of the mind to investigate the nature of the experience. So we need to ground ourselves and say, okay, let's just stabilize our mind on the breath first with a feeling of loving kindness or like a mantra. So once the mind is still enough, then you can do the insight part, right? The second part of Vipassana, right? Now you can see clearly the nature of experience. So that's how samatha, which is sustained attention or concentration and insight, ultimately they become one. But for most people, they do need to ground themselves and train their mind to be stable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just gonna be pulled into all these different directions, right?
Uh,
By
yeah.
their thoughts and their tendencies, their habitual tendencies, their patterns, their conditionings, what we call afflictions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, just whatever is obscuring your mind to see the mind's true nature. And that's why we said that the mind's true nature is always available. But just because it's always available, it doesn't mean you're always seeing it. You're always having that insight because we're bombarded and our minds are filtered with so much like afflictions and obscurations or like solidities and contractions,
Mhm.
emotionally, cognitive. So we can't clearly see it, but it's still there. And ultimately, we'll see that even the afflictions and the obscurations and the contractions are also made up of the stuff of
Yeah.
emptiness or mind or your true nature, because that's all there is. Yeah, it's just a wrong view, right? Ultimately, the snake and the rope is actually made of the same substance. If you really investigate it, you can go down to the rabbit hole of physics too, right? You say physics is just everything is just empty space vibrating at the fundamental level, right? But you can actually directly experience that through meditation, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you were talking, it was almost, I don't know what you think of this, and it's just coming up right now. And it's almost as if one version of this path is almost arbitrarily or like creating actual distance, seeming distance from thoughts, emotions, sensations, and like
Mhm.
keep separating yourself from them because first we're like completely absorbed by them and identified with them. We create
Yep.
enough space to observe to then realize that they are the whole, was never any space between anything anywhere
Yeah.
in a sense. But it's like the space first must be created in order to realize, and then it all comes
Yeah.
back because there's no space between anything. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you tell that on day one, and it's like, and then maybe you get those approaches. There's nothing to do. You're already there, and there's no
Yeah.
space between anything, and you're swimming in true nature because it's all there is. And yet, sometimes it might be helpful to create some distance. I mean, for some people, I'm sure there's all sorts of people, different approaches work differently, but to create some
Totally.
distance from
Yeah.
the stream of thoughts, I think probably I'm sure that's probably one of the most universal experiences, right? You sit down, all right, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, focus on the breath. Here it is. What am I going to do tomorrow? Like that quickly and that immediately. And that's sort of also the messages I got a bunch of like I hear that a lot of like, I think it's not for me. I'm particularly not good at sustaining attention. And it's almost like, can we
Mhm.
normalize it? This is like the most universal experience. Yes, that's gonna happen. It's the most common thing that you try, for 3 seconds, you try to breath and now you're thinking, am I doing it right? Wait, that's a thought about the meditating. I'm not
Mhm.
actually. And then you're like, I'm not meditating right because I'm not. It's like, let's say
Yep.
in the beginning, you're doing it exactly right because that is the challenge. That's the initial, you can play a game like in 10 minutes, in 1 minute, how many times can I just realize that I was lost in thought? You play that
And to
game.
bring it back to the yeah, bring it back to the object of meditation.
Yeah.
For a lot of
And
people, is the breath or the body
cool.
sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
5 minutes, twice you realize you were literally thinking about what you're gonna do tomorrow, and then wait, what am
Mhm.
I doing meditating? Cool, once. And then you
Yeah.
do it again, and then you're like going to the gym and you're practicing, this week I went from noticing twice in 5 minutes to no, every 14 seconds oh right, I'm supposed to be
Mhm.
meditating. So you're just initially starting to create some distance and some space from the identification that I am my thoughts, I am Diego who's formulating this stuff rather than but then who's
Mhm.
noticing that those thoughts appear and notice how they just come and you almost can't even um orchestrate your next thought. Like what am I going to think in 7 seconds? I don't know. Here it is, that thought. And it just went away. So just taking like a bit of a backseat, whether it's an
Mhm.
emotion, and I think that's where a lot of suffering comes from, right? The identification with I am this
Yeah.
anger. I am frustrated with the world and I am living in this frustration. And
Mhm.
actually, one of the things that I've found most helpful, like as an immediate, like person who's never meditated and like, what is, or when they have a particular interest in managing their emotions, just this
Mhm.
sort of exercise where, like, think of a memory or an idea, something in the future, in the past that will produce a sensation in you. So, like excitement that this thing's going to happen, or a sad memory. Like, don't torture yourself, but anything that will produce some sort of emotional reaction. And just, I mean, if somebody's listening to this and wants
Be
to do
with
it,
it.
come up with that. And then just even the initial, now that which you're feeling located in the body. So that excitement for this thing that's going to happen next week, just see it. Oh, and it might be like, oh, I guess it's kind of like just here. And you could do it by contrast. Like, is it in your knee? No, the excitement's not in my
Mhm.
knee. It's kind of just like here, and it's like, okay, and then describe it in certain terms of texture. Like it's tingly and it's like pulsating a little bit, and it's just like this size. Notice the edge, like where does it end? And then by the time they're finishing, just trying to concentrate on describing it, then you can point out you've already probably forgotten the story that produced that, and now you're just with the
Mhm.
sensations themselves.
Yep.
And just
Yep.
that distance, story versus the sensations that invoked, I find that to be one of the things that is most helpful for people with managing emotions. Because if not, I am excited, and then suddenly, oh, it's just this manageable sensation that is just like this pulsating thing in the chest. And
Mhm.
then there's the images and the thing of me imagining what's going to happen. Two separate things. And this can go
Mhm.
away and this remains. And this is what causes either suffering or joy. And then if you could just be with it, suddenly now it's more manageable. Oh, I've got this thing right there. Okay, it's this little pulsating thing. Or the sadness was this kind of like heavy thing, or what? Oh, it's just in the body. That distance, I think, is
Mhm.
something, one of the things that meditation can help us do, creating distance from things that are just all packed together. The story with the
Yeah.
sensation and the emotion and the guilt of feeling that, it's all this contracted thing.
Everything is compounding, compounding.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what's created a contraction of like I am this body mind, right? So most people only experience themselves through like an observer behind the head or maybe somewhere in the chest. That's how they locate themselves. But then actually, if you started to meditate, you see that you are not just located in the body, mind, you're actually this entire field of experience. But then in order to get there, you kind of have to reorient your attention or maybe redirect your attention from your usual way of perceiving to another, object of concentration or attention, right? Because like our patterns and our conditionings will create this push and pull tendency, right? We're getting pulled towards our desires and we're pushing away what we don't like. The Buddha said the desire to become and desire to not become, right? Pushing away the pain, the dissatisfaction, the negative emotion, and they've been pulled in by the desire, the positive emotions and positive states, positive thoughts. And that push and pull is what's creating the volition for phenomena to further compound. And the more phenomena compound, the more it gets reinforced in the patterns of compounding that's creating your conditionings. And we just happen to be conditioned into thinking that we are this separate entity inside our body. But that's actually just conditionings. And we can see through that. Right. And then again, like before we can see through that, we need to create a distance from our usual way of compounding and our habitual tendencies and patterns in order to de-escalate the compounding, de-escalate the patterns that we're so habitually being conditioned to do and to, repeat and to, compound. So that's the first step, right?
Yeah, I think that that one, which seems to be the one we're most comfortable in, in the year
Mm,
2026, and is the discursive thinking, because
yeah,
thoughts are also same as the body, but that in particular seems to be the loop that we get caught in. I'm sure through the development of language and stuff, like we got really good
yeah,
at being able to do that and to
yeah,
communicate with one another, but then that became this primary mode of like that's where we're kind of constantly looping and having these inner conversations with
yeah,
ourselves. So
exactly.
that's what we're really trained in. So yes, I think because you can
De-escalate.
still sort of do it with just thoughts. You could try to, but then that might be more difficult because it's what we're used to. So you're not really breaking enough thing rather than
Mhm.
go to the body and then just let that fade away and now investigate, just the sensations of temperature and pressure in your hand or something. Like I think that's helpful because we're very, I don't know if that's a
Yeah, that's a modern thing, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
modern
yeah,
thing.
that's a very modern thing. That's why I think for a lot of people that first get into meditation, they automatically have this idea where meditation is about emptying the mind. It's not ultimately about empty the mind. It's again, it's seeing the true nature of experience, which can include thoughts or no thoughts, right? One of the insight you just gave is like when you start to observe thoughts, you see that thoughts kind of spontaneously arise and cease, and that's one of the insights, right? Everything's impermanent. That's one of the insights into the nature of the experience is that all phenomena arise and cease, right? And that's there's three characteristics in Buddhism. Well, is one is anicca, which is impermanence. Everything is arising and ceasing. What we can say, oh, that's very easy to see, right? People are getting old all the time, or like, the sun is rising and the sun will set every day, every night. And the days are passing. Today's Monday, tomorrow is Tuesday. But then how closely can you observe impermanence? Can you observe impermanence at the microscopic level? That would make a difference in your level of suffering. That seeing the insight at the subtle and subtle level, say impermanence, right? So there's a degree of insights too. Another insight is anatta, which is not self, right? Anatta means that you don't have a fixed self, a fixed identity. Like you said, if you identify with your thoughts, you see that thoughts are always constantly arising and ceasing, then where is the permanent self? Or if everything's interconnected, where is like the permanent source of experience? You find that there is none, right? So those insights also are interconnected, impermanence and not self. And if you cling on to either one of those, there's suffering. If you cling on to like the experience of no thoughts, you can also experience the suffering too. Or if you cling on to the idea that everything is impermanent, so you're like constantly looking for impermanence, that could be some trap. So there's like not an ultimate insight in that regard, except to see that everything is inherently empty. So even impermanence is inherently empty too, right? And then even no self is inherently empty. But in order to see that first, you kind of have to use the remedy of, say, the inside of no self to cure the disease of a separate self or solidified self. Or if you have the technique to bring you into a thoughtless state, that's only a remedy, a medicine for you to cure the modern disease of overthinking, over intellectualizing. So that's why people have these little funny ideas about meditation, right? They are remedies for you to cure your current condition, but every insight or every state you accumulated or experienced in meditation also has to be seen through to lack inherent existence.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the ultimate insight. That's why the Buddha says emptiness is form and form is emptiness.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna bring up this guy, which I got from you.
Resting in illusion. Oh, resting in nature of mind. There's
Yeah,
three of them,
Moksha.
right? Yeah.
You know, and he says, now all phenomenal existence, all the things of both samsara and nirvana, are from the outset without self and are beyond conceptual construction. Through ignorantly clinging to them, beyond beings wander in existence. Samsara and nirvana, various joys and sorrows, do indeed occur, yet in the very moment of arising, they are empty in their nature. Know that they are like illusions, know that they are like dreams.
Mm. I
Yeah,
like the word ignorance in there, right? Ignorance. Ignorance is a very interesting word, right? Like the Buddha will say, ignorance is what causes suffering, right? That's the first noble truth. But what is ignorance? It's your tendency to ignore certain aspects of reality, right? So if you're lost in your head all the time, you're ignoring, say, your body sensations. You're not tending to other field of experience. You're not tending to the experiences of, say, the heart, right, or body sensations, or even the breath. So you're ignoring those parts about yourself. And if you're ignoring parts of yourself, you're actually, in a sense, especially emotional aspects of it, you're actually just like suppressing them, right? So when we start to redirect our attention to parts of yourselves that we are ignoring, then that's another way to think about meditation is that you are practicing to become the totality of your experience. Right?
Mm.
And suffering, ignoring certain aspects of reality is what creates in that split. Right? That split that's creating the duality between self and others, body and mind, this and that. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. There's in order to just for anybody if that sounded maybe not clear in the there's this well actually Daniel Ingram does this about I've seen him do this in interviews, which I think is a good example for people to kind of this sense of like, if you try to like come up with, think of a scenario, and again, pretty simple, but if you close your eyes and really remember that memory and whatever, like the percentage of experience that was probably very big because you close your eyes and you're like imagining that stuff happening
mhm.
and suddenly it becomes your entire experience. But if you try to do that again, and it's not looking around, but just maintain awareness of just the room that you're in. I'm talking to you, but I can see there's a window here, there's birds chirping, the sounds of whatever, and I'm thinking of that memory as it comes up, just the proportionality of
Mm.
experience in the total
Yeah.
in this volumetric sphere of awareness is like, oh, it was this sensation here, and I almost can't. I would have to arbitrarily sustain it, and I would probably have to look up and like get lost in my thought while I have to ignore this to
Mhm.
amplify that, and we do that very automatically. That's why we suffer a lot because like my boss said this at work, and I'm like spinning and
Mhm.
spinning, and I'm not paying attention to any of this,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
there's this sort of when you start seeing through the no self, because then it's not like then you're constantly scanning all your surroundings to never get caught in thought. It's not also that. It's just it seems like once there's this arbitrary barrier that's just keeping you here, and you're giving these sensations a specialness that they are you. So these have a priority. So these here rather than everything else. And once
Yeah.
you can sort of see through and dissolve that barrier, it's kind of effortless that the birds chirping is the same as the thoughts arising and the emotion. It's like it's all gains
Mhm.
some proportionality. So none sensation is preferred over the other, or there's not a barrier. Yeah, but these are this and that is that. It's like, oh, it's all happening, fluctuating. Oh, check out this thought about my boss that happened, and the birds are chirping. There's this
Yeah, the chirping. Yeah, they're in
yeah,
an equal footing, as the Dale
yeah,
would say.
equal footing,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then you can okay, I'm gonna pay attention to that, but and they can still carry the information they need to carry. Like, oh, it turns out I'm dissatisfied with my job, and it's not like negate that either. It's like it can still carry the information what you need to discover from it. Same as Ben, so but so is the birds chirping. It's like the arbitrary selectiveness of reality because reality is just there and it's unfolding, and yet we like this yes,
Mm.
that no. But then when there's an openness for all that arises, let it, and then just kind of be open to, well, you are the thing, but as
Yeah.
if we're receiving it, it somehow levels things into a proportionality that ends up somehow being, we could say, more pleasant or better or healthy. I don't know, but definitely on the other side of that, or identification causes a lot of turbulence.
Contraction. Yeah.
Like yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. Localize, right? But then once you start to see the nature of phenomenon, the nature of awareness, you realize that, oh, actually, your being is actually extremely spacious. Actually, it doesn't have any boundaries, right? It's the mind, the concepts that's creating boundaries, right? So you become this vast spaciousness.
Yeah,
Uh,
with that one, I when I've had these conversations and with people, like one that I think is particular, like sound, I find a very strong point.
Yeah, me too. I love meditating to sound. Yeah.
When you're sound and you ask somebody like, is the sound inside or outside of you? Like many things happen at once. You might get it's outside of me. And then once you probe that, typically there's a conceptual, well, the sound is coming from the birds outside and I'm listening. But
Hmm.
then if you ask like, yeah, but where is the sound happening? Not where is it,
Hmm.
to just loosen the conceptual. Okay, the bird's out there, but where is the sound happening? Because if it's outside of you, how are you experiencing it? So then you try to nudge, okay, and then you're like, okay, it's inside me. Yeah, the sounds are happening inside me. Okay, so where's the edge of that inside, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
or okay, or that's why I think sound is fascinating because it's clearly coming from some source outside, um,
Yeah.
but it's happening in here, and that I think is
Yeah,
if
because
you do with a
the
heartbeat,
duality
it's
gets
like okay,
really
it's inside you
strong.
because you know the heart
Yeah.
is inside you, and then you're like stuck on the inside. But something that seems
Mm.
is outside of you, yet it's being experienced inside you. Where can you find the edge of that? Can you find the boundary between
Mm.
inside and outside? And then in that
Yeah.
space of where the sounds are occurring and where the pressure of this finger in your face is occurring and your thoughts, those are all being experienced. Now find something outside of that space. And then so, and a lot of times you'll get somebody like, well, I don't know, France. Like, I'm not experiencing France right now. But then it's like, the idea of this is like try to stay with the immediate sensate experience. Like your idea of France right now is the idea of the country. So maybe you've got an images of an Eiffel Tower and the word France. That's what you're experiencing right now. Other than that, what exists rather than that thought? And
Mhm.
where is that thought of France happening? In the same space as these sounds and these sensations and emotions. Keep trying to find something outside of it. And it's like you're pushing the system to try to generate a glitch where like,
Mhm.
wait, there's nothing outside this space. And suddenly I think that's one of the e e I've found like simplest ways to get somebody in like when they talk like everything is connected or unity and they're just words, but suddenly like, wait, there's nothing outside this space. So what is
Mhm.
missing if there's nothing?
Mhm.
And where is the edge of the awareness? Just and your mind might try to like go upwards and then it imagines it keeps going into outer space and it's like, okay, you're just playing with imagine like find the boundary and it's like you're
Mhm.
trying to hit at boundaries so you can get the system to glitch sort of like, oh, where's the self? Where's the boundary? And then
Mhm.
you start catching these insights and it's almost like a process of doing it enough times so then it starts becoming either a default or the whole system goes like, oh, okay, got it, there is no boundary. So
Yeah.
it might
Yeah.
happen suddenly or gradually, but then like, oh fuck, it's boundless all the time,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
literally all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, another thing is like the line between the inside of the body and the outside of the body, right? We usually think that okay, there's a space that's inside the body, and then there's the external world, which is outside the body. But then if you investigate the contour of a body, if you like Vipassana, you see that all those sensations are actually just rapidly arising and ceasing, so fast that arising and ceasing even becomes one. But it's just like, oh, can you find the boundary? Right? Every time you find a boundary, go into it a little deeper.
Yeah.
What does the boundary feel like? The boundary is just more wiggly sensations. If you go into that more, what is that? You're just going to go empty space vibrating, right? That's another way to just really investigate the lack of duality between inside and outside, right? So it's like, oh, those sensations, where are they really occurring, right? The example you gave is sound. I love sound because if you just close your eyes and listen to sound, the birds chirping, the airplanes flying, or whatever the case may be, you see that sound is panoramic, right? And then you can actually see, oh, even sight is panoramic, right? Sight see itself and sounds hear itself. That's why the Buddha say in the heard, there's only the heard. In the seen, there's only the seen, right? In the sensing, there's only the sensing. There is no separate hearer or separate observer that's in the head that's perceiving the sound, right? Because that separate here or separate observer is what's creating that duality, that split, that separation between inside and outside, between like me hearing the sound versus just the sound sensing itself. So all these different ways are for you to kind of contemplate, investigate into the again the nature of experience to see that oh, it's actually just this boundless
Yeah.
spaciousness that
That
is
one.
somehow aware,
Yeah.
right? Space is the closest metaphor, but it's space-like, but it's not exactly like space because it's aware, it's knowing, it's self-cognizing. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the interesting part about it.
one of
That's
the
what
most
truly
like
who you are.
one of the
Yeah.
most memorable moments for me was I think it was with my hand, but it was just there's a sense that I am here directing attention to the sensations that are here. And
Hmm.
then when suddenly that became nonsensical because wait, what is the difference between a sensation and the knowing of the sensation? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, the knowing of the sensation is the sensation itself, and suddenly
Yeah.
and then like I
Yeah.
think it was with my hand, and then anything else, it's like, oh, everything is just knowing this. The sensation is the knowing of the
No, in
sensation.
itself. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
that collapses, and it's like, because yeah, it's very automatic. I am here pointing attention to something that is already existing there, and if I'm not paying
Right.
attention, it's there, but now I'm paying attention, and now it's coming alive in my experience, rather
Mm.
than the knowing is the experience. There's no separation, but that one, yeah, that's one of the glitchiest things for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what you described is even collapsing that duality that you talked about earlier, right? First, you create like a temporarily ground, like an observer for you to observe sensations. But then the next insight is seeing how even that observer is
Mm.
also empty of inherent existence. Because a lot of the times we can get stuck in being identified with the witness, with the observer, right? We're going around and just like trying to observe everything through this like observer, which can create its own insistency on how experience should be. You should always be like observing things from a detached perspective. And you know,
Yeah.
there's some traps that can come with that. There's some tendencies that can be reinforced with that kind of perceiving. But then the deeper insight is actually seeing that there actually is no separation between the observer and the observed. That's like non-duality 101, right? The subject object duality collapses. And then the insight is exactly what you described, right? In the sensing of the hand, there is just a sensing. There's not even a hand, right? Because the hand is just a constant. Right. So everything, every sensation you can say is sensing itself,
Yeah.
that it doesn't need to recursively loop back into an observer for the sensation to sense itself. Sound is very easy to perceive that, right? Birds chirping, sound
And you
is
just
hearing
are
itself.
hearing it. You don't, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's no one here to hear the sound, right? And then when you realize that we don't need to loop our experience back to a centralized observer, thinker, hearer, then a lot of that contractions that's being reinforced your whole lifetime, right? Probably starting from you when you were a kid, your mom was like, hey, that's you. That's
Mhm.
Frank, that's Diego. Immediately, all these conditions started to compound. Here, we think we are this separate entity that's perceiving the world. But then once that's seen through, as you say, even the contraction are just more sensations. That one cluster of sensation cannot actually observe or look at
Yeah,
another
bad.
cluster of sensation. Then there's no more grasping. There's no more separation. Right, right. And then, like I said, the insight is that the experience is the sensation, right? So you can even say awareness is the sensation, is the experience, is the nature of mind. Because even if you sort of see through the witness, there is another step after the witness where you become awareness. Like Eckhart
Mhm.
Tolle probably talks about that in his book. Oh, I am awareness. You know, it's not ultimately wrong to say I am awareness, but there can be a tendency to even ratify or substantialize awareness to be the new self. But now you are awareness, and then everything is arising and ceasing through and in and out of this awareness. But even that is a duality, the separation between awareness and the sensations
Yeah.
that you assume to be arising in and out of awareness also collapses. So there is just the sensation. But then you're like, oh, sensation, what is that? Okay. There's a tendency to even make sensation into a new ground. Oh, now everything is just sensation. But then you realize that's also just a concept. You
Yeah.
know, even sensation itself, quote unquote, is seen to lack inherent existence. So
Yeah.
you
Like,
just move, that's just examples where you move from one ground to the next, but you self-invalidate every single ground. You can use one ground to self-invalidate the
mm,
previous ground. You stand on one ground, say the witness, and you self-invalidate thoughts. But then you have to self-invalidate witness too, maybe from the vast spaciousness of awareness. But then you have to self-invalidate also the identification or the concept of oh, awareness or consciousness.
yeah.
And then what are you left with?
It's like, yeah, the frames keep getting maybe more subtle and stuff, but they're still
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And it's, for example, that one of sensations, like for me, when I think of that framework, it's almost like you're in this empty, vast, volumetric space, and then sensations are these wispy clouds that arise, and everything is just that without any story behind it. But that again is, I just described a bit of a
Yeah,
story. Like it's
yeah,
this
yeah,
volume and sensations
yeah.
here, spur and sounds, and it's all these like shimmering, glowing little
Mm,
things. Obviously, that's why it helps close your eyes. It's like, oh, and then I attach story. Look at that story float away. But
mhm.
then again, that is another frame. It's like, and what's observing
Yeah,
that? Now you're
yeah,
attached to
yeah.
that as a framework, and keep, going backwards or seeing through that too. And then the certainty that comes with that, or ones that I find have been that get tricky, or slippery when talking with people. Also, like textures of experience. So, like, particularly with psychedelics, when people report like it was more real than real, like
Mm.
Which is the same, the analogy is the same. You know, you wake up from a dream and you're like, no, I know I'm awake now because this feels
Mm.
how it feels now. And it doesn't have that dream texture. And then maybe you have like a mystical experience or you do psychedelics and it's like,
That's more real.
that
Yeah.
was 1,000 times more real than this. But the way I think of it is almost like if you have like sauces and this is a
Mhm.
sauce of realness and you just squirt more sauce of realness on that experience, it just carries the texture of realness or profundity, and those are wonderful and like beautiful when you have this sense of
Or
profound
like bliss, bliss. Yeah,
bliss
yes.
or profoundness or understanding of clarity or knowing like I saw how everything was interconnected and now I feel at peace because there's this knowing. Well, what is that knowing made out of and where is it happening?
Mhm.
Like that sense of more real than real is also another texture to be seen through, and it's
Yeah.
not to invalidate like don't believe any of that. It's just also see through that more real than real is another, oh,
It's
check
also
out
a
that.
duality. Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
cool
This is more
texture to
real than
feel.
that.
It's
Yeah,
a really
yeah.
cool texture to feel. And then yeah, yeah, because
Yeah,
then
I think what you were describing is also goes in line with the seeing that inseparable dance, right, between say the container and the content, or seeing that
mm,
there is no separation between background and foreground.
mm,
Like, okay, first there's this container that is being identified as the big self, right, the Brahman, the Godhead, whatever the case may be. But then you realize that there is no container at all. Right.
mm,
That's another way to describe like the progression of the path. Is like, okay, at first you're just like this tiny thing in the head, but then once you start to meditate more, you start to like, I don't know, exhaust the contractions in your body, you start to untwist the karmic knots in your body mind, and then you start to experience more and more spaciousness. So there's almost
yeah,
like this bubble of awareness that just keeps expanding, expanding, and then maybe the centralized self, the voice in your head gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But eventually, you see that actually the center here and the space is actually also codependent rising. Then you collapse even that duality between, oh, okay, the space, the container, and the content. Yeah, because like even with the smallest speck of an observer here can still create a sense of a very vast spacious bubble, right? But then when that bubble collapses, the container collapses, there's no more duality between like foreground, background, content, and context. Everything here also gets seen through. Yeah, yeah. You just realize that there's never been a separate observer to begin with. There's never been a separate self, and there's never been like a background of experience.
mm,
Yeah, but it becomes very obvious to you once you tap into it a few times. And again, going back to the stability of the mind, you do need to ground yourself and stabilize the mind in order to, I guess you can say, hold the view, hold the viewless view of reality. And that also takes reps. You do need to put in the reps and train your mind to be stabilized enough to see what's always and already the case. Because
yeah.
again, we are so used to getting pushed and pulled by our tendencies and desires and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
And I think for, let's see, because I'm sure that that can also sound very, what the fuck, or like for somebody, because I think for, even just the very initial investigations into this, so like if we're talking about no self, um, I think even very initial pointers or really questioning this for literally anybody can start to, you can start to get a sense of what this is. So in the sense of like, we kind of feel I am this, I'm Diego. I have these emotions. I come from Venezuela. I've had these lived experiences. I have this past that I know. I have the parents that I've had, and these things that I'm intending to do, my desires, my dreams, my emotions. And then it's you start once you just start paying attention a bit, it's like, well, sometimes I feel angry and sometimes I feel sad, but do I disappear when the sadness isn't there? No. Okay, so I can't be my emotions because they seem to change
Mhm.
and shift.
Yeah.
Am I my thoughts? But I'm thinking of speaking with Frank now, and now I'm going to think about giraffes in the park. So which one of those thoughts was me, or I'm the one who's thinking? So I'm not my thoughts. And then it's like you start questioning just who I am. You don't need to get into like 100 years meditating in a cave. You could just do this right now. Okay, so what? Who is the one who's observing the thoughts? Um, and I think a lot of this is one of the I think the hardest things I find when speaking to people, and I know this was part of it, is just going from conceptual understanding to sensate direct experience. So who am I? And you just start thinking, well, I'm this person who no, like if you touch yourself right there, you don't have to have your thoughts. You just feel pressure there. It's there. You don't
Mhm.
have to look.
Yeah.
Where is it? Right? You know where it is. So the moment, where are you? Something goes like, whoop, and it's like, okay, maybe it's behind your eyes. It just goes, where is you? Whoop, it maybe it's a sense that, oh, it's behind the eyes right there looking out. Maybe for some people it might be the chest or the heart, but I think very common is right behind the eyes. And so then that sensation, it's like, can you grab it? What is it made out of? It's like, well, and when you probe people, it's like, well, it's like this pressure, whatever. And then it's like, so you are just a pressure, like your dreams and desires and who you aspire is just like a pressure behind the eyes. Suddenly that doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, wait, right.
Yep.
And it's like, wait, where is the me? Like, where in the body is it at the level of direct experience? Just like you know that pressure's there, I know that pressure's there, and now identity, me, where, and to
Mhm.
start getting those glitches, but always trying to. I guess that's the difficult initial thing to distinct, make the distinction between you're thinking about it, you're thinking about conceptually, well, I must be in the brain and I must be here. You're having thoughts about it, and that's fine. But at the level of just raw experience, like you can feel that, you can feel the pressure on the chair. And now, where are the sensations of a me? Where are the
Mhm.
sensations of a me? And like, see where the
Yeah.
mind tends to go. It doesn't tend to go into your bicep, right? It just goes somewhere in here. Can you notice what those are made out of? Just same as like with sadness. Oh, it's like this heavy pressure and it's like tingly and it's where are the sensations that are you? Where is it?
Mhm.
And just that initial, it tends to be difficult and for a reason. It is hard to find. Good luck trying to find that little
Because you can't really find it,
that
right?
little
Yeah.
marble of experience that there it is. That's the
Yeah.
point. You can't quite
Yep.
find it, and you'll notice those sensation shifts. I found like suddenly, oh, it's here when I do that. It's here. Oh, it's not. It was never even the same little
Mm.
sensation. It's moving all the time, all around. It was
Yep.
never even like a particular sensation. It's just the idea of it goes like this. It like tries to look somewhere and assumes that there is something there, solid and consistent and permanent. And it's just like
Yeah.
question that and look for it, and then you'll see how it's like you can't keep finding it. Or like the
Yeah.
point that if you can observe it, it's not you by definition,
Yeah.
right?
That's another good one. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like buy into that to because it'll be a good trigger. Like if I'm observing it, it's not me. So just keep okay, this
You
sensation.
keep going meta, as we call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
I
like
think
if you
that's
can observe the thoughts,
it's
if you
an easy
observe the thoughts, is
way
not you.
it's
Yeah.
an easy way for somebody to like because if you speak of
Mhm.
no self, that might sound like you're insane. What do you I'm clearly here, but just I generally like
Mm.
try to who's observing these thoughts, who's observing
Mm.
and just see how glitchy it is. It's like whoop, it keeps you keep not finding it. So I think that's a very without getting into the deeper end of it, for anybody right now as we were talking, hopefully they can sort of do that and see if they can really find something that sticks or not.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think instead of framing it as no self, I think a better way to frame it is there's no separate permanent self. Yeah,
Nice.
that's a better way to frame it. And I think the process that you just kind of walked us through, um, is called self-inquiry, right? It's like, okay, you observe something, and then if you can observe or experience something, it's not you. It's very easy for us to do this with an object, right? If I look at the spoon, okay, the spoon is not me, right? And then you start to investigate your thoughts, your body sensations. If you can observe it, if you can even experience it, then it's not you. So you're kind of quote unquote objectifying everything. But then when you get to the deeper ends of it, like we said, you can get stuck on this observer. Now, this observer that's doing the inquiry also has to be seen through. So you're like, okay, can I experience or observe the observer, right? So you just keep going meta until everything just closes. There's no more distance, right? So that again is that kind of like closing that gap. You've created a distance and then closing that distance, right? If you can observe the observer, then where are you, right? If you can even feel into the feeling of doing this investigation, then where are you? And then what you just said about the sheer fact of unlocatability, like you can't find it, that's finding it. Because it's gonna sound a little esoteric, but you're nowhere and everywhere, right? You're nothing and everything simultaneously, but you also the something, right? So we're not negating our human form at all,
Mm.
right? That now there is a flexibility, a range of aggregation that can go from like experiencing that you don't exist at all, but there's just pure present. And when I say you, I mean like the ego mind, to I am everything, like I am everything is one or something like that. But then there's also in the in between state, right? There is the somethingness that can continue to unfold. So you don't need to negate it at all, right? So there's the flexibility to be like everything, to be nothing, and be something, to be here, to be there, to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. So, like, I think what we're emphasizing is really the flexibility of the mind. It's not a particular state. It's not a particular mode of being like the observer. Neither is it to permanently abide in like the God mind, right? Those are are just different aggregations of the mind. But the real insight, again, is to see the lack of inherent existence, right? So you can see that none of these states actually has inherent existence either. Like the deepest meditation state, or even just being lost in thought, none of them has an inherent existence. So now you have the freedom to go back and forth flexibly, experiencing many different modes of being or different views simultaneously. And sometimes it's more useful to experience the world through a self view. You go to a job interview, you probably don't want to talk about yourself, right? You probably want to
You're
present
not
yourself
hiring
as a very
anybody. There's
capable.
nobody here to hire.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to say that. And people do say that and under the wrong context. And again, people find them insane, right? But now you have the freedom, the room to like be totally yourself, and while at the same time feeling like you are not inherently the self. So that's why somebody asked me like, what it fundamentally is like, I guess an enlightened being or a Buddha or whatever. I said it's someone who is utterly and totally themselves, but while simultaneously going beyond the self or transcending the self, right?
Yeah.
So that is just taking both views, extreme view of like no self or existence or non-existence, and then transcending them both, but while including them both. So the middle way, right? People hear of the middle way. The middle way is not a point between two extremes. It's actually what includes but transcends at the same time. But I guess it's very difficult for the dualistic mind to really tap into this. So again, it's step by step is really important. And another comment I want to make about like how you said just turn thoughts into experience, which we kind of pointed towards that already in the beginning, where instead of seeing thoughts as content or as thoughts or story, you just experience thoughts as an experience, as a sheer effect of sensations. So there's different routings in which you can see through the true nature of experience. So observing it or doing self-inquiry is just one routing. Another routing is exactly what you described, is instead of just observing it, you don't even have to create an observer. You can just immediately feel. You don't have to move anywhere. You can just, the moment you're lost in thought, just, okay, let's just experience what being lost in thought feels like. Contact
Yeah.
the sensations of being lost in thought. And that will give you the insight too,
Yeah.
right? So there's different routing. So again, going back to what I said in the beginning, you are actually just contacting reality directly and intimately, right? So once you're lost in thought, you don't have to create an observer to observe it. Again, that's just sort of a bit of a means to an end, right? But then you can actually just right there and then shift your perception in experiencing thoughts as sensations, as this undulating, morphing, luminous sensations, right? And
Yeah.
you're contacting the texture of thoughts, right?
Yeah.
The texture of sensations, and really feeling into the quality of the sensation. Just like seeing a painting, you don't
Yeah.
have to move the painting. You don't have to change the painting. You don't have to even distance yourself from the
Yeah.
painting. You can just see, oh, this painting is actually made up of paint, right? It's actually made up of pigments, right? But then that pigment is inseparable from the content, right? It's not like there's a separate container or a different thing that's giving rise to the paint, or
Yeah.
sorry, to the content. The paint, the content, sorry, the content, which is like the stories
Yeah.
of the painting and the paint itself, the context is actually also inseparable. That's what the Buddha mean by the form is emptiness and emptiness is form. There's a form, but it doesn't have inherent
Yeah.
existence. Yeah, yeah.
This that you just said, it's great because it reminds me of a theme that I want to talk about, which I think is probably what so many people are interested in. And it's, and I think nowadays it's like therapy, emotions, healing. This is
Mhm,
like, I don't know, the biggest industry there is now, or like, which is great that people are interested in healing, going through their emotions, like trying not to bypass. And that which you just said,
mhm,
I think it's been part of like my journey in terms of, I think there's something too, and I don't know, great to get your reaction on this, of like using emotional therapeutic healing work as almost using it as an object of meditation. So when you were saying you don't have to create
mhm,
an observer to distance and detach yourself, like I am feeling
mhm,
this, just be in it. So an example, I don't know where I got it from, but it was like when people are or somebody's like, I'm lost. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know where
mhm,
to go. I'm just lost. I don't even know who I am anymore, and I'm feeling lost. I don't even know what I'm feeling. And so once you just point out, so are you sure you're feeling lost? It's like, yes. It's like, well, then you know exactly where you are. You are in lostness. What does lostness feel like? Is it pleasant? Is it uncomfortable? Is it scary? Like you're always in direct contact. We just kind of like somehow forget we are, but you're always in
mhm.
contact with this moment. So if in this moment I am feeling
Always, yeah.
lost, okay, and what does the lostness feel? Does it feel great? No. Okay, so what does it feel like? It feels scary. Okay, so now you know you're feeling lost and you know that is scary. And would you want to feel a different way. Yeah. So oh, there's frustration about feeling this way. Okay. Look at these immediately. You know where you are, you know what you're feeling. But, and as a person, and maybe we can get into our personal journeys, I don't know, but I've come from having felt I was very detached from my emotions. Like I was, if you
Mm,
ask me like, how are you feeling? It'd be like, I'm fine, but I don't know. And I would hear people speak so richly about their emotions throughout the day. Yeah, I got mad and then this. I was like, it's a difficult question for me. I don't know what I've been
mm,
feeling. And for like literally almost all my 20s, I would kind of describe myself like that. Like I wouldn't know. It's like, how do I even access it? And when I start doing work, like how do I do it? How do I access? Because there's
mm,
this notion, but even just that, okay, there's frustration with not being able to feel your feelings. There's frustration.
mhm.
There's
Yep, yep,
something. You're
exactly.
always in direct contact with what is. So
Yep.
I think it helps a lot of the emotional work to take a meditative approach. Just be with what is and notice it. I'm feeling
Mm.
frustrated because I'm not advancing. Like, here's a frustration. Where is it? What is it like? I mean, is it
Am I
unpleasant?
doing it right? Like,
Yeah.
when we try to do the
Oh,
meditation, am I doing it right? That frustration of not doing it right is actually the point of contact in which you can,
right there.
investigate and develop it
And
right
it's
there.
almost like
That's your object for meditation.
in
Yeah.
some ways, like this is not to tell anybody to do this or try this. I'll just mention it as something that for me has been like almost pain is also some, like if you just pinch yourself, it's very easy to
Mm.
just like
Very,
focus on
that's
that.
for
'Cause it's
immediate.
right
Yeah.
there. It's right
Yeah.
there. I don't need to like. Sometimes the breath can be subtle and you kind of lose it. It's like nope, there's I'm pinching my. It's easy. So and pain,
Mm.
I think, as something like that particularly useful for someone inside like emptiness. I mean, I think for emptiness for me has been the most like the one that felt the most transversal. And it to me it's just been what is a sensation made out of? Like so if
Yeah,
you
exactly.
okay, I feel a little prick right there. It's just like very angular, very, very tiny pointed there pitching. And then, so, but what is that made out of? And it's like you're trying to just see. So what are those sensations that make up that pointiness? And you just concentrate enough, and suddenly, like, there's nothing. There's no
Mm.
center to it. It's almost like the
Yeah.
sensation was the echo of something that didn't exist. It's like, it's just like an echo that left, and then you keep doing that long enough where it's like, there is nothing there. How is this happening? And then you do it with another sensation, and then enough sensation, and then like, whoop, the whole thing is somehow empty yet appearance because clearly look at the richness of this and movement
Mhm.
and color and yet no inherent center like little marbles of experience which are the little part it's just like there's nothing there it's just this um that one for me has been the most like penetrating one and then even with emotions it almost feels like being in contact with my sadness is almost being in contact with the emptiness of sadness because it's like go to the center of
Yeah.
it, go straight to the center, and it's both empty because it's nothing, and yet you're
Yeah, it
fully
appears. Yeah.
you're fully
Yeah. You're
experiencing it.
fully there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
Yeah.
it's weird because it's not dissolving it into smithereens and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's
There
just
can
like
be a feeling of that, but ultimately it's not about dissolving. Yeah. It's
no,
about
it's
just
just
seeing
like
clearly. Yeah.
and like the center there's no center but it's like going into it it's like there's empty like if I did it right now in real time like there's the pressure on my chair and there's a sense of gravity so
Mm.
the fact that I even can speak about it means that there's like, I'm pointing towards something a pressure on my chair but like what it it's like nudging the mind into it. It loses relative. Everything only almost exists by relative because there's contrast and there's weight and the concept of
Yeah.
weight. But then when you investigate, like, what
Yeah.
is? It's like tingly and pressure, and what is pressure made out of? It's like it just like checks out. Like there's never anything there. So it's both the simultaneity of it's something is clearly there, and yet somehow it is.
Empty of inherent
Yeah.
existence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're pointing to is seeing through the flexibility of reference points.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because like if you think you have a center, that's because there's a reference point, right, from here
Yeah.
to there. Or even like emotions, right? You're not feeling your emotions because there's somehow a distance.
Yeah.
So anytime there's a distance, there's a reference point. But then once you start becoming more intimate with the experience itself, you'll see that reference points are actually just constructs. Like you don't have to dissolve reference points. You have to see how they codependentize. That
Mhm.
was the insight you have. It's like everything only exists in relation to other things. That's also the insight of like dependent origination, right? Of like
Yeah.
interconnectedness. So it's not like the self is inherently wrong, right? Or like the experience of the self is inherently wrong. It's not really that. It's that the self arises, the experience of the self arises dependently of other things, right?
Mm,
So you can apply that to pretty much everything. Like the only reason why this conversation even is happening is because you and I are co-creating each other, right?
mm,
But then because of this co-creation, neither of us can have a fixed essence or a fixed entity. That's
mm.
another one, essence. It's really to see that nothing has a true essence.
Sure.
Yeah, because the self, it can become an essence, or if you try to like deconstruct the reality and you now land at a soul, that could be an essence, right? Something to grasp onto. That could be a solidified point to latch your identity onto, right? So you realize nothing has essence. But then how do things appear? Through relations, to through everything just kind of codependent, rising, boom, boom, boom. This arises and that arises. This ceases, that ceases.
Mm,
So this process of everything arising and ceasing in relation to each other is the insight of dependent origination.
mm,
And you'll see that actually what's giving rise to these seemingly contradictory things are actually co-arising. So there's no paradoxes, contradictions at all. Once you can start to see that relation as being completely flexible, right? The self and others co-arise, right? That means that, all right, none of us has an essence, otherwise we couldn't co-arise, right? But just seeing the flexibility in reference point
mm.
allows you to not have the tendency to annihilate experience or to try to like, distance or fade away from experience. You just see that, oh, all suffering is, you can say, the manifestation of seeing reference points as solid or fixed, right? Your relation to
Yeah.
anger changes because you see the flexibility of that reference point between like you and the anger, right?
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
have to get rid of the anger. You don't have to get rid of you. You just
That
see the flexibility in reference point between
that that
you and your girlfriend, whatever the case may be,
yeah.
right? The
That
flexibility of reference point
That
is
reminds
really
me of
important.
like a recent experience. For example, I had ACL surgery. So then in the post rehab, that I got to gain flexibility back in the knee. And there's this moment where the chiropractor has to like just really push through it, and it's gonna hurt just to regain the flexibility. So it's like, oh, let's try this with pain, and it was pretty in pain. And so just noticing if I was the thing is like physical pain seems to be very quick, so it's hard to just
Mm,
stay with it so much, but it's like becoming the pain. If there's no reference point, if you don't step outside of it, you're completely
yeah,
lost in the center of pain. So there's nothing to be hurting. You're just
yeah.
swimming in it, but it's very quick. So it's like I was
That's a good
able to
one.
do it for maybe like 3 seconds, and then you're like, because I was observing myself do it, and then I'm out of it. Now I'm hurting, but it's like you just
Yeah,
even enough to see like when I was synonymous to it, what could be hurting? I just am the pain. But then
yeah,
when you like
yeah,
you reflectively like I'm feeling now it really hurts. But just to even catch that, wow, it is
yeah,
possible. Even like
yeah.
physical pain can like
Mm,
you can just but it requires really staying with it. Like you are
hmm.
in it because the reference point seems to be lost. But when I am hurt, then I am suffering. Then it's like much more suffering than rather than just being synonymous to that experience because you managed, let's say, some sort of absorption with it by just paying close attention to it.
Yeah,
Um, with
yeah,
the
yeah.
ethics
That
thing. Mhm.
Oh, I was gonna make a point about that experience of pain because again, we're not trying to get rid of pain because when you try to get rid of pain, then you're trying to change the what is, right? I think if I can sum up one word, what awakening is experiencing everything as it is. That's it, right? That I think I think Ashante said the same thing. It's just not having an ounce of resistance towards the present moment experience. But that can get very subtle because you can actually grasp onto letting go too. I was like, okay, let's just have no resistance. And that becomes its own reference point. I just want to have no contraction, no pain or resistance. So maybe a better way to put it is like you not resisting resistance itself even.
Yeah.
So
Because
the,
then
the
if
difference
you're
between pain and
resisting,
suffering,
you're doing it wrong. But then,
yeah.
oh, here's resistance. Can I be
Yeah, can you
non-resistant?
be
Like
with the
it's
resistance?
part of the
Yeah,
thing that
yeah, yeah,
unfolds. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that might be part of the accepting the humanity aspect of all this, where like it's not becoming some deified thing that now is perfectly centered and equanimous and calm. It's like there is no, it's like a bit behind that when frustration arises. Can you rest in
Mhm.
restlessness? Can you in oh, here's impatience. Great. Can there be an opposite? But it's not like, oh no, now I must not be in it because impatience is here. That must be I'm not quite
Then
correct.
you're creating the
But
split again. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
no, I think in a very broad sense, it's basically the desiring of a certain state over another. Like, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have
You're
this
trying to
idea
insist on a certain
where
state. Yeah,
awakening or enlightenment, it's like I will be peaceful, equanimous. I will probably speak like this all the time because I
Hmm.
will be always aligned and centered. And if I deal, I lie, and then I come back to it. But that's the state. And anything that doesn't feel, taste, smell, or look like that is not it, or like,
And
but
then you create a
rather,
resistance
yeah. And
by
now
insisting that state.
even in the hand gestures, I just created a split, right? That
Yeah,
state and not this state, but rather, no, this whole, thing is, oh, look at frustration. I th Probably I would say that there does seem to be some sort of, maybe some reduction, change in perception and relationship to suffering that for
yeah,
sure, because if not,
definitely.
what's the point of all this, but what would be the motivation, incentive? Like, at least in my experience, there definitely seems to be a
Yeah,
much s-
yeah,
pleasant spaciousness to all this, and then to feel, and I guess this would be great to talk about, which I'm sure is something people want to hear, and I'd love to also hear from you, is like, how has this affected our actual lives, our real human lives, and not in a cave somewhere meditating, but rather in our
mhm.
relationships and life and going shopping and in creative and working in our art. Like, has this done anything? Has it improved our life? Do we feel more ourselves? How are our hearts? How are our connections? Do we feel more loving, peaceful, kind, accepting, compassionate? Sometimes, maybe not. I don't know if you can
Yeah,
speak to
absolutely.
that, like
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
real level. What does this
yeah,
seem to do?
yeah, yeah. Like if someone asked the Buddha, "Are you a man or a god?" Right, and he says, "Neither.
Mm,
I'm just awake to the nature of experience." Right? He says,
mm,
"I'm awake." Right, but everyone is fundamentally awake. Right. Again, it's just these obscurations that are in the way that's creating these splits. And I think it's really important that you mention being human and like accepting pain as it is and not resist pain because immediately when you have a painful experience, immediately the mind wants to insist on getting rid of the pain or you want to grasp onto an experience that's more pleasant, therefore simultaneously pushing away the pain. Even that gesture, right, is creates a resistance. So Shiden Yang said suffering is pain or pleasure times resistance. So again, we're not trying to get rid of the human body, the conditioning, because there is nothing but conditioning if you really investigate it, right? There's nothing but you can say all this appearance, it can be afflictions, but you're not afflicted. So there
mm,
can be afflictions, but you are not afflicted. Yeah, it can be pain, but there is no one there to feel the pain. But that actually allows you to have a full experience of the pain or even the pleasure or the full range of human experience. So that goes in line with like how you, once you start to see through the lack of inherency in the self, you actually become more of yourself. There's more spontaneity, more effortlessness. The effortlessness also includes being effortful too. You can actually, just like you can rest us restlessness, you can actually be effortful and exert while feeling like you're being effortless because you just said even that duality. Yeah. So it made a huge difference in how much I suffer. And after walking this path for, I don't know, 10, 12 years now, like I started this path because number one, I used to be a sex addict and I want to reduce my sex drive. So I stopped cheating on my girlfriend. The other one is just like it was in the beginning. I wanted to understand what is the nature of mind, nature of reality. What the hell is this? Who am I? So those two things was what got me started on the path. And I used to be like suicidal, actually, manic depressive. I used to have bipolar. So I was for some time a very depressed person. Yeah, very depressed person.
mm.
And I tried to commit suicide many times before, yeah,
No,
especially in my like early 20s. But then yeah, right now I can just sit here and say that the suffering level, if you want to quantify, has been reduced by 99%. Yeah, yeah. But then it's hard to say like what's going to happen tomorrow when,
sure.
your parents died or you lose your arm. It's hard to say, right? Yeah. But then just so far, right, the suffering does decrease tremendously, and then that just comes as a byproduct of seeing through the insight into the nature of experience. But even after that initial awakening, maybe in the Zen tradition, they can call it kenshu, your body might needs time to integrate to that opening. So the conditioning gets unraveled and gets untwisted over time to align itself with the insight. But overall, like I wouldn't say suffering ceases completely because, like I said, what does that mean completely, right? Yeah, but then your relationship to it definitely changes. Yeah, as a whole, like I would say, I'm unconditionally happy 99% of the time. And when I say unconditionally happy, I mean a kind of a happiness that's inclusive of happiness and sadness. Because when we speak about something that's unconditioned, it means that it doesn't depend on anything,
Mm,
right? Because most of the time when we think of happiness, it's always being happy about something. Oh, this happens, therefore I am happy. So happiness for under the dualistic lens, it's always dependent on conditioning,
Mm.
right? But then this unconditional happiness, happiness with a capital H, you can say it like that, or a flow state with a capital F, transcend but include all emotions. You can still experience all emotions fully,
Yeah.
right? But then you're also not any of these emotions simultaneously. So you go beyond, but include. And same with like, any duality, like effort and effortlessness, right? It's a kind of spontaneity that is still there, even when maybe your body might feels like it's a little awkward. That can still be there. That's just part of human conditioning, but there's no resistance to that.
Mm.
Even that is experienced to be spontaneous.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Not that there is no restlessness, but then you find restlessness. You're not even creating like a container of equanimity or peace around the restlessness, because even that very subtle duality can continuously create more split, right? So again, you are just fully yourself, and then simultaneously going beyond the self. So you can actually, with creativity, right? You can actually create all the arts that you want, but then there is just less identification to say the role of an artist, or maybe less of
Yeah.
expectations
Yeah.
about what this art is going to bring to yourself or to the world, right? And then there's just less anxiety around the process of creativity. Yeah, that's another thing. And I don't know. People like get into meditation. They probably only want to refine their character, right? Right, which is totally fine. Like they want, I don't know, becoming, I don't know, more intelligent, more creative. Increased focus, more energy. Better health, greater work capacity, or even enhanced physical performance. Like meditation can enhance all of that. Right. But then if you don't want to go down the path of like awakening, that's fine too. Even if you just practice meditation, there are so many different kind of meditative techniques that can actually enhance all these stuff. But if you go to the deeper end of meditation, these will become byproducts.
Mm.
Yeah. The reason why I say byproducts is
Yeah.
because once you see through to the true nature of experience, you realize all these different things that you used to crave, right, to be identified with. Okay, I want more energy. I want more creativity. I want to become a better lover. I want to get stronger so I can attract mates. All these, there's nothing inherently wrong with them, but they are, if not seeing through clearly, they can become the source of craving, uh, suffering, and clinging. Right, right. But then there will be phases where you have to kind of let go of all that stuff. But when I said let go, it's not even trying to annihilate them, because then you can kind of run into this view of like nihilism or annihilation, where you're just trying to like get rid of anything. Just gonna get rid of every last speck of the self, right? Or the other side of that view is like eternalism. Like you just want to expand your consciousness forever, because you don't want to feel certain things that's arising in your body. You don't want to feel certain emotions, so you just like create a distance bypassing. So these views also gets transcended. So once you see that all these different things that you want for your character, that maybe once you start to get on the awakening path, you realize, hey, those are the things that made me suffer. Those are egoic things, right? You don't have to like annihilate them, but then you do have to see through how they are all just lacking inherent existence too, just like everything else. So there can be a phase of like grieving. Actually, it's almost like grieving the old
Okay.
self. Right, right. Like that's why people go through like dark night of the soul kind of experiences, where they haven't completely see through the emptiness of all these different things that they were identified with, like fame, power, like wealth, greed and all that stuff, or even desire. They haven't completely seen through to their lack of inherent existence. Yet they've seen through some of it, right? So they're like in this in-between land, what I could totally call like no man's land, where they kind of have one foot in truth, one foot in like in infinity, the other foot is still in delusion, or still in the solidified final world, right? But then once that insight is stabilized enough, you'll see that actually all these things can still exist. Everything that you wanted for the character, they can still be there. And now they just become byproduct
Mm.
of you recognizing the true nature of reality. If you live from there, all these things like health, even greater work capacity, or even physical strength actually increases. People say when you stop caring about something, that something becomes like more embodied or like more yours. It's exactly what it is. It's like once you stop attaching yourself to these different, I guess, egoic phenomena, egoic states, uh, you actually have more of it without being attached to it. Yeah. So you are in the world, completely, fully engaged in the world, but you're not of the world. That's what they mean by the middle way, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, there's so much there. Wow. But Actually, the
but hey, let me just make one point that kind of brings it back together. Is
yeah,
you keep talking about like feeling into your emotions intimately, right? That's really, really important because I do think a lot of people use spirituality to bypass actually.
yeah.
They can like cultivate and access this crazy states of consciousness or even psychedelics, right? They take like DMT or acid. They just go into this like incredible like mystical realm, or they might even have glimpses of no self. But then they're actually using that, or even using spiritual practice as a means to not look at their own stuff, not face uh, whatever they need to face in order to not ignore any aspects or any part of reality. Say if you go to Goenka retreats, right? A lot of people, if you're not careful, you see that people go into Goenka retreats over and over again for like 20 years, and they're just insisting on the state of equanimity or peace,
Mm.
right? Without realizing that's actually a very subtle form of resistance. They're resisting everything else that isn't equanimous. So they're ignoring states that are not equanimous or emotions that are not equanimous, therefore bypassing them. And whatever you bypass gets suppressed. It will have to be examined and expressed sooner or later. If not now, maybe before you die. That's why people have like life reviews, right? So my point is a lot of people do use spirituality to bypass. But then what you just said about even feeling every aspects of yourself, like the negative, positive, neutral emotions, feel all these things, right? Fundamentally, you want to be able to accept every single part of it. And that's what love is actually, right? Unconditionally loving yourself means unconditionally loving others and loving reality,
Mm.
right? But then once you access the unconditional happiness, unconditional love, or even just the unconditioned state of existence, nothing can affect you. But that's not excluding the conditioned at all, because
Yeah.
the relationship between the unconditioned and the conditioned is also not two, right? Right? You can have unconditional love while still feeling passion, ecstasy, romance, or even negative emotions, love and hate, right? Because unconditional love actually include, but transcends both love and hate, right? Because if you just insist on a certain form or a certain mode of love, which a separate being, we do that, right? This is the kind of love that I believe in. Then you are ignoring other aspects of what you insist on love should be. So for example, we push away hate or discomfort or having a difficult conversation with people, right? But then you actually just insisting a certain mode of what you think love is, or what you think awakening is, or what you think realization should look like, right? That I think itself is like I would say the number one trap in on this path is like you're not seeing what you're insisting on, or you're insisting on
Mm.
oh, awakening should look this way. Yeah.
Yeah. You're
But before it's
scripting,
like insisting
scripting.
on like the self, right? Before it was like, oh, we spent our whole life insisting on this ontology of like a separate self. We didn't even know that. But once you get to start to investigate into like non-duality, we start to see that okay, I've been insisting on the self all my life, but now I'm insisting on something else, like no self, right? I'm insisting on the vast spaciousness of awareness or
I
presence
think
or
that's like the
equanimity or peace and love. That's another form of consistency.
like switching
You-
one
yeah,
story
switching
one
to
story
the
for
not
another. Um,
exactly.
and yeah, I think with I mean, I don't know, the stuff one sees online and stuff. I mean, I don't know, like there's the seemingly collective story that here we are, evolved mammals on this planet Earth, and evolution is taking its course, and we have civilization. We can read history books, and here we are. We're advancing inside that. And then, sure, after you can have certain experiences or whatever that then give you, let's say, glimpses of something that might feel more real than real. And it's like, oh no, we're actually all spirit and we're souls
Yeah.
training on earth to
Yes,
learn
yes,
the
that's a really
lessons
good
or whatever.
example.
But
Yeah.
what actually happened, you just switch one story for the other. This was a
Yeah.
story about
Yeah.
governments and
One view to another. Yeah.
governments and civilization. Now that's a story about cosmic spirit learning lessons and true love. But in a
Mm.
way, that's also story. And what is that story made out of? And cosmic blissful unity with God. Where is that
Mhm.
occurring? To whom? And what is that made out of? So it's like that could even be seen through it. And I mean, I don't know. I definitely don't have enough experience with these things, but my intuition is like there is for sure value and wisdom and really profound things in also that spiritual realm of like, wow, you access this kind of entity, you received this through the unconscious, and without giving it any kind of like an ontological certain reality. Yet there seems to
Mhm.
be like a lot of
Yeah.
really cool, interesting, profound things with different stories. And I think that flexibility of the story actually enhances the axis. Like in my experience, I've
Of
found
course.
the
Totally.
more
Yeah.
real you permit something to be, you just gain more access. So like,
Yep.
in a space where like I'm gonna talk to an entity or have this, if you're like constantly like this, no, 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 like the access is in there. But if you
Or
just
if you grasp onto it, oh, this is the only thing that's real, right?
if you
Then
just
you're
loosen that, like what arises suddenly, like oh my God, there was like a thing an image came across. What is that about? But you just like inclining yourself with curiosity. Like once the boundaries of ontological reality really at least get flexible, there does seem to be, at least in my like some access to certain things. And I think that's what so many people talk
Yeah,
about, where people have
totally.
just access into information that seems to come from somewhere else and all that stuff. Um,
Mm.
Yet that could also be a solidified story about how this human thing is the dream, but this spiritual
Yeah,
thing is the actual thing that's real. This is a, so again, we got a division, and we're like, I want to spend more time in the spirit, and the human is
yeah,
caught up in our
yeah,
own silly
totally.
nonsense. And yet, what is the thing that also, like you always say, like includes, transcends, but also
Mm.
includes?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because all these things that you speak about are more or less in the realm of experience, right? Right. You have different experiences. You can have like a very human contracted experience, or you can have a very godly experience or anything in between, but those are just experiences. But then we're not negating experience, right? Because again, the unconditioned includes all experiences. The insight into non-duality or truth or whatever includes all experiences, yet it's also beyond them in a sense, not exactly beyond, but the experience is completely holographic. So everything is interpenetrating, but nothing is touching because everything is coreless. So when I say like beyond, it's not even like, oh, here's like the unconditioned, here's the condition. The
yeah,
condition is not separate from the condition, the unconditioned at all. It's just how you view it. That's why all these traditions emphasize on having the right view, right? If you perceive reality through the wrong view, you will see afflictions, you will see the content, you get absorbed into the content. But if you see through the right view, you will see that, oh, this is made up of, empty vibrations or whatever you want, however you want to describe it. So it's all about view at the end of the day. Yeah, and how you relate to experiences. Yeah. I think Robert Bia said, if everything is a fabrication, then nothing is a fabrication. Yeah. So another
yeah, yeah, yeah.
way to describe this whole process is like seeing the fabrication of the self or the mind, right? You're seeing how, oh, everything that I thought was real, I'm actually fabricating it, right?
Mm.
I'm fabricating it with the mind, right? Even the sky is a fabrication of the mind. Even the computer, right? Okay, you can see that the body is a fabrication. So when you see through something as lacking inherent existence, you can use the word, oh, it's a fabrication, right? But
Mm.
then again, if you start to be attached into the view that everything is a fabrication, then that itself becomes a form of inconsistency. Now you're creating a split, right, between like fabrication and non-fabrication. But then once everything is seen through to be a fabrication, then you go back to the start again.
Yeah, it's almost like
Nothing is a fabrication. Yeah,
is an illusion real? It's like, well,
yeah,
no and yes, because no, an illusion is that which isn't what it seems. But then what are we
yeah,
talking about? Well, there is an illusion because it doesn't. It's like
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
confusing.
yeah, yeah.
Although I want to make sure to. I mean, I don't know how much you've shared on conversations. I'm sure you're a pretty open guy, but to first just acknowledge and thank you for sharing a bit about your personal things and like struggling with suicide and depression. That's definitely um, a challenging.
Yeah, I love talking about this. You
Yeah,
can
okay,
you can
great,
ask away. Yeah.
but thank you for sharing. And I was wondering, like, what came up for me was, what would you tell to that Frank? Like, if you could just give him a little pointer or advice, what would you tell him, that Frank that was in the midst of
That's a good
depression,
question.
suicide, addiction, like,
One thing I'll tell that Frank is like everything you're seeking, you have right now. Like I was seeking a bunch of different stuff, right? I was seeking, say, I want to have sex with as many women as possible, but then I realized that like every moment, once you tap into your true nature, feels like the universe is having sex with itself, raw,
mm,
without a condom. That's how intimate it is. But or like I was seeking, I guess, aesthetic. For example, I wanted to create really aesthetic artwork. I want to capture really aesthetic shots and my movies and stuff like that. But then you realize that every moment is aesthetic with a capital A. It's so beautiful. Just seeing reality as it is so beautiful without your beliefs and stories and filters. It's so beautiful. Yeah. And of course, you're seeking, I don't know, I was seeking like really mind fucking experiences, right? That's how, after I got into spirituality, I had this thing about like, oh, I want to use art to mind fuck people because I myself like to get my fucked. That's why I'm always watching
yeah,
like really trippy movies. I want to mind fuck people. I want to get my fuck. But then you realize that every moment, in order for reality to appear as it is, even right now, is the most mind fucking thing there is. Like, how does this phenomenon even occur, right? Yeah, so everything that you're seeking for, yes, you already have, like for
mm,
everyone. But then again, you have to go through this process of like, I guess, decondition yourself in order to untwist some of these karmic knots that are getting in the way, there's filters and lenses of perception that are in the way for you to see what's always and already available and awake and luminous and
right,
empty. that's one thing I'll tell him. So I was telling him to, just stay with it. Whatever it is that you're doing, keep doing that. Because the one thing I realized is that nothing in your path, I don't want to say everything happens for a reason, but if you look back on your path, like every
It
single
took you
particle
there.
was aligned.
It took you
Yeah,
there.
yeah, it took every single thing, all the sufferings, all the pain, all the bliss, all the mistakes, even phases where I felt I was trapped, right? When I was trapped in mystical experiences, I had this whole Kundalini awakening where I had thought I had superpowers. I was trapped in like the guy who had a Kundalini like power. There's all kinds of trap. Even all these traps, again, of course, if you have the teachers to point to you that that's the wrong view, the process can go faster. But even without that, right? That's part of the path too that led you here. Because if one thing that realization does is completely recontextualize your life, your trajectory. Like for example, like past, future, present. We think that there's an older self right there somewhere in the past, and there's a future, and then there's a present. The three times exist linearly, sure, but then there's also the timeless, which is the unconditioned. The timeless includes the three times, but it does not exclude them, because a lot of people get into non-duality like, oh, there's no time, so they immediately just negate their past, don't want to look at their shadows, don't want to deal with, I don't know, their traumas from the past, and that's bypassing too. So I would tell that Frank that just keep going and just keep doing what you're doing. One thing I do want to mention is that the whole recontextualizing part is that you start to see that it's always been like this. Yeah, yeah. Even when you are like, a teenager suffering, having no girlfriend,
Yeah,
it's actually this too, experiencing it. You couldn't see it back then, but
sure.
seeing it from here,
Yeah, yeah.
which is not
Yeah, no, I know
seeing it
what you
from
mean.
here, you realize it's not like over there actually, right? Because the three times actually, not only do they also codependent arise, they exist simultaneously in the past, future, and present. So I'm actually telling that Frank right now, just by realizing this, that Frank is being like quote unquote like awakened through this present moment here, which also is empty. There is no present really without the future and the past.
Mm.
So it just brings
That's beautiful.
everything together in a way where everything kind of like loops back on itself, right? There's a vector in and that
Yeah.
comes
The
here
the
and
whole like
pulls out.
fractal nature of
Yeah,
everything. Like, oh
yeah,
my God, it was all
exactly.
at any
Yeah,
time scale, at any of the, it's like, oh my
exactly
God,
that.
it was all
Yeah,
perfectly,
yeah, yeah,
poetically
yeah,
like doing the same thing that it's doing on the cosmic level, at the microscopic level, at the human level. It's all doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's another flavor of
Oh, that's that's that's
experiencing reality
beautiful,
as it
and I
is. Yeah.
think I hope that can be helpful for anybody who's listening and maybe is in that past you state where like, oh, it's depression and anxiety and I don't have the thing I want. I mean, if you're gonna take Frank's word for it, because at the end all these things are that you only live them
You have to
for
try. You
yourself.
have to like see
But
it for yourself. Yeah, yeah.
but if you're gonna
You have
trust
to see
somebody
it for
like
yourself.
Frank, and I would imagine you would also point to thousands of years of writing, and people have said like all that you're seeking for really is here. There's nothing missing, and this is not
Yeah.
some poetic thing that is romantic you already have in your heart. It's like no, at a real, literal level, and that we were talking. It's like in the space of awareness, where's the boundary? And if you can't find
Mhm.
it, so what's missing in the space? And you find I have a hole in my heart of the love, but it's right there.
But the whole is perfect.
Where is the space in which something it's already all contained within the same is that is? So at a real sensate level, you get to find in a way that there it's inconceivable that it couldn't be whole, because where is there a gap in anything? There isn't. But it's a conceptual thing that I am missing this in my life, and of course it's hard to feel that prior to whatever. But why I like even provoking the question is like, so somebody who's there right now, and if you're like wondering whether to go down this path or explore meditation or these things, like um again, I think only people can talk from direct experience, but like there's nothing missing. There's nothing missing, and all that which you seek is already there, and that you have the capacity. Like nobody can also come heal you and doing this thing. Like it's movements inside you that end up unblocking and do the like. Obviously, it helps to have a teacher, somebody who can point, somebody who can be a mirror to all these things and go seek those things out. But it's almost like if right now for whatever reason or we'll take a hypothetical person, I somehow convince them that you just won $1 million for whatever reason, I fake a lottery ticket and whatever, the feelings that you have right after you like the I don't have to worry about money anymore,
Mm,
like all those things that wash over you, that sense of like, oh fuck, finally. Nothing exterior happened. I said I vibrated my vocal cords, it entered you, and suddenly now you're feeling peaceful and like relaxing and like the sense of all happened inside you. Nothing in the external world changed. I just said things, you believed them,
mm,
and so now and then I'm like, oh no, so are you seeking the $1 million or are you seeking that experience? Because if you still get the $1 million and still feel like shit and like you're not worthy and whatever, then what is the point of any of that?
mm,
So you're seeking that state and like not you didn't get the $1 million. I just and we don't have to get into the like is that the right way to do it to just lie to yourself? It's just pointing out that it's the experience that you're looking for. That was already within you. You didn't like get injected with bliss and happiness from this outside source. Something in you just
mm,
relaxed. So you
mm,
get to seek that, which like, oh, what by not having that much money, what does that produce in me? Oh, am I a failure? Why do I consider that to be a failure? What are the things? And then you can pick these things apart, and then eventually you start finding, oh, that was already there. I am, kind of just want to love and be who I am, and kind of have this openness. These things are already within you,
mm,
which I think is probably some of the things we mostly feel collectively. I think the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, or I'm not there yet seems to be very
mm.
pervasive. Like little things are just operating always on the background. Yeah, I've reached this, even in the spiritual path for sure. Yeah, but I'm not there yet. I haven't had a
Yeah, yeah, but
cessation.
I'm not there. Yeah, there's
I
different
haven't,
stages
I
that I have
haven't,
reached
yeah.
the stage, but not that stage.
Or
Yeah,
or in your work, obviously. When I get the
yeah,
promotion, then I'll feel that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's a very awesome pointer. If you just, even if you don't haven't experienced it, but just believe it for a minute and just, okay, if that's the case, what about this moment is unsatisfying? What about this moment
Mm,
feels incomplete? Investigate there. Just even leveraging the assumed knowledge, even if it can be temporary, that there's nothing missing and you're already whole. So, where is that thing that feels unwhole? Where is that part of me that feels dissatisfied? And then that becomes a great pointer to, okay, go investigate that. It's there, knowing that at least to know that it really isn't fundamentally like that. It gives you a really great point. Like, what's dissatisfying about right now?
mm, mm,
Why am I impatient to what's going to happen to why am I not here? What about this is unsatisfying?
mm,
This moment. What's missing now? And whatever comes up, it's like a great thing to investigate. Like that's immediately because also it's like, where do I start the work? How do I start explaining with right there and just sit for 5 seconds? Like, what's unsatisfying? What isn't good enough? What
mm,
could be better? And then take that as a place to look at.
mm, mm. I think a really maybe it's like the pointer, but it's also works in the beginning and the end. Is just to really investigate the sense of knowing that's always already there, like a sense of
Mm,
presence, whatever you want to call it. There's a sense of knowing that's there regardless of what your experience is. Like, things can arise, things can cease. You can have thoughts, no thoughts. You can have observer, no observer. You can feel bliss, you can feel pain, you can feel a hole in your chest. All these are, again, conditioned phenomena, right? The sense that something is missing is only there because if you get this thing, this will fulfill that hole, but it's based on conditionings, right? So, but then there is the unconditioned that is always there,
mm.
regardless of the content of the conditioned existence. But then again, I have to like warn that you don't want to attach yourself to the unconditioned because then you just, be attached to another view again because the unconditioned and the conditioned are also not two, right? Right. But there is something that goes beyond even the duality between permanence and impermanence, beyond the duality between self and non-self, beyond all dualities, beyond all experiences. There's something that is knowing. There is. It's a kind of knowing beyond the intellectual mind, right? When people hear knowing, they immediately think, "Oh, it's the mind that's knowing. It's the thoughts that's knowing." But the sense of knowing, presence, awareness, what do you want to call it? It's empty apparent existence. Yeah,
Mm.
somehow it's cognizing itself. There is a recognition of that, and it's recognizing itself, right? It's recognizing itself through separation and non-separation, right? But even like this sense of a separation is still that which is recognizing itself. Yeah, always and already the case. Yeah, yeah. So if you can find it by not finding it, like you said earlier, and if you can just stay there. Yeah. But then of course, some people can just like find it once and they just stay there. It's very, very rare. Right. Even like Eckhart Tolle, he spontaneously wake up the present, but he went through years of suffering of the conditioning. He just didn't know he was doing the work. Yeah. So we do need to like stabilize our mind in order to de-escalate from our usual ways of uh, perceiving the world, our usual ways of compounding, our habitual tendencies. You have to de-escalate from usual patterns and then maybe redirect it to like the breath, the sensation of the body, to the witness, whatever the case may be. But then even amongst all these different techniques, either watching the breath or elicit the feeling of loving kindness or feeling the body sensation or just feeling emotions intimately or therapy, whatever the case may be, breath work, there's still something that's there, luminous and self-cognizing. And what is that? Yeah. If you can find that and stay there. Yeah.
Mm.
And if you need to go through the process of, sustaining the attention or stabilize the mind or do some therapy work in order to clear out a certain obscuration or obstruction in order to have the stability of the mind to see what's always and already the case or to recognize is a better word. Um, you know, the different people have different paths, right? They will have to go through different processes in order to recognize what's always there. So I think one of the questions is this path like gradual or sudden? It's both.
Mm.
It's both. The recognition could be sudden, but sometimes it does take progressions. Like, oh, you got to go to a 10-day retreat. First 3 days, you got to count the breath. And then you got to scan the body part by part. You go through like jhanas 1 through 8, or you go to therapy and you slowly start to construct your emotions or whatever the linearity of the path is or looks like for you. There's that. But then there's also simultaneously the pathless. Yeah, which is recognize what's always there. Yeah, you don't want to just hang on to one or the other, right? A lot of people hear this like, oh, I don't have to practice. That's an extreme view. The other side of it, oh, it's just going to be a continuation of like further and further refinement of like this or that view, or like I have to expand consciousness infinitely, and then like I have to like gradually dissolve all conditionings. That's also another trap too. Yeah,
Mm.
can you hold these two contradictions simultaneously? I think that's another really good way to point to the non-dual nature of reality is that can you hold contradictions, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously people,
Just
if people
everything
start
ends
to,
up being a paradox, like
yeah,
nothing.
and then there is no paradox, actually, right? Yeah, then there is no paradox, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people hear these things that immediately their mind would create a bunch of paradoxes and contradictions. But then if you can hold contradictions, paradoxes, resistance, contractions, whatever that seem to be like against each other, like two extreme views, if you can just stay with it
Yeah.
and it will
Like,
it will just,
would
and
you,
let the coherence uh, arrive by
would
itself,
you,
right?
for example, put in that category, like it's these things that seem like paradox, like when you become everything, you become nothing. Like it's for sure, obviously the case. I mean, is that a paradox? It just seems to make sense, right? If you are everything, then there's nowhere
Yeah.
one thing like you actually become nothing. Like those two things
But
are.
then you are everything simultaneously into something. Yeah. But then
Yeah.
that's the insight that you arrive after holding the two paradoxes of like nothing and everything, right? Well, before you, I'm something, I'm just Frank. And then I realized, oh, there's this vast spaciousness. Immediately, there's a paradox there. Frank, the body, mind, and the vast spaciousness. Or Frank, the body, mind, the self, and no self. There's a paradox there. But then can you, not trying to get rid of,
Yeah.
clinging on to
It's
either side, can you just let the paradoxes and the contradictions be there?
yeah.
That's why you need the fitness. Or I keep talking about fitness. You need the fitness to be with the contradiction without being pulled or pushed
Yeah.
into either
Oh yeah.
directions.
As you
And
say,
then the paradoxes will cohere. And then you get a sense of coherence.
yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
As you're saying it, like I can feel the because the inclination of what we're used to, that that seeking certainty, that it just wants to
Yeah.
whoop
Yeah.
and land.
Yep. Yep.
And it's
Exactly.
like this practice of just yes and like both and then
Mm.
can they both be experienced simultaneously?
Both
Like
and neither. And then
yeah,
you,
and then that
yeah.
that little playful dance rather than like because it
Mm.
wants to like finish
Yeah.
falling into a thing and
Yeah.
rest
Yeah. Yeah. You
there.
want to objectify things. Exactly. Yeah.
Like it just finished landing. It's like sometimes the landing is the non-landing of
Yeah,
anything.
it's like we're so conditioned to always seek for a finality, right? Like an answer. Like even just listening to this conversation, immediately you can start practice like, how is my mind trying to grasp onto what I'm saying? Can you even grasp it? Or like, how is my mind trying to conceptually make sense of things? right? We go through life feeling this way, right? There's always this like grasping towards either certainty or a certain experience, right? Pleasant, unpleasant, whatever the case may be. There's this mind that's constantly trying to grasp.
Yeah.
And every time you grasp, you create a resistance. And every time you create resistance, you create a separation, right? And over time, you get conditioned into a separate being, right? So just watch how your mind is constantly trying to get somewhere, and then let that feeling of contradiction
Yeah.
just be, and then seeing how there is a sense of knowing that's not just around, but within the
Yeah.
contradictions. And from the perspective of that knowing, there is no contradictions at all. Because reality is so huge and so infinite that it can house infinite contradictions,
Mhm.
right? Right. That's one of the signs. It's like you are actually progressing. It's like, oh, sure, the reduction of suffering, but the reduction of suffering, you can say, is the byproduct of letting everything be as it is
Yeah.
and holding the paradoxes without trying to cling on to either side,
Yeah, I think
right?
I
Yeah.
watched recently a conversation. I think it was Lock Kelly with Adi Ashanti, and just a point that he said is like, what remains when there's no problem to solve? You know, that one being like,
Yeah.
okay, what's the when it doesn't need to even investigate or like pick
Mm,
it. What is the prior condition or what is there if nothing
mm,
needs solving? Because you know we're very
yeah.
problem
Yeah.
solving oriented. So just to remove that away, and I think that does a lot of traction to just, all right, what is that?
Just stateness. Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Stay in
what is
that
that
knowing.
isness that is before it needs to even
Mm.
look to anything.
Yeah.
What-
What is that isness, that presence that's infinite and boundless and has no separation, but which again can include a separation. So if you are familiar with that state, I call it the stateless state because it's not really a state. Once you're familiar with your true nature, then now you can solve problems too. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like that you can never solve a problem again because a lot of like what I call non-dual zombies do get fall into that trap of like, oh, there's just nothing to do. I don't need to solve anything. And
Or
then they actually bypass a lot of
you're
life.
getting caught up in content, so you're doing a
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you can't have any thoughts or concepts, and then they fail to, I don't know, develop their intellect again, which is obviously useful even on the spiritual path, right? So like now you can engage again. Now you can think. Now you can solve problems while at the same time being disidentified from any of these conditioned phenomena while totally be engaged.
yeah.
You can fall in love again. You can have a relationship. You can get married. You can have sex. All the things that the character always wanted to do, make money, but then you're just not identified with not just the outcome or the character that is identified with these different endeavors, but the raw feeling, the phenomenons of these different sensation itself. You just see through how they're completely lacking inherent existence, empty but completely luminous. Yeah,
Speaking of
emptiness is love. Yeah, yeah.
you speaking of love, how has it been for you? Like the kind of if we just take the perspective of the heart, like throughout this
Mm,
thing, how has it been for you of like even I mean I'll give a brief brushstroke of mine, but coming from like that very um just emotionally detached. I felt every like my initial point of inquiry was that I was studying like end of life regrets research, like statistically, what do people regret the most when they're about to die? And it was all interpersonal relationships. And although a
yeah.
lot of my life was really pleasant and I enjoyed, I noticed like, ooh, when I scan my relationships, I feel everybody's 17 miles away. Like I don't feel close to
Mm,
people. Like I see people like, oh, I miss my aunt and like that love. I was like, I don't, I'm like in this isolated tower. I enjoy my life nonetheless. And yet
yeah.
this seems to be the most
Mm,
important
mhm,
thing all around, like love and connection. So that was my huge red flag of like something's off or something's wrong. And that began a point of investigation. Then through this whole meditative,
mm.
like there is
It's
story, like a way to describe this felt like the melting of this thing, like whatever contractions they're in, it's melting and melting, and now to be able to, it's almost like presence and love kind of then start to becoming the same thing. Because when you're just
yeah.
with somebody, like there's this openness. It almost felt like at some point the heart was just, it's just there leaning its cheek, ready to be touched with whatever it is. Because with whatever, like as you allow sensations to arise and just feel what needs to be for experience to experience what is being experienced without any preference, the heart is a part of that. So it's just like there, oh, this is gonna hurt. Oh, but let that land, let it hit, let it hurt, or let it feel, let it get excited. And then wow, to relate to people like that, where you like this openness and like I'm just willing to be engaged with you. And then it's almost like every moment becomes the main event because what else could be like if you're just really here? But a lot felt like it was through the heart, at least for me, of like just letting this thing just open and then it, yeah, like if it was just like this and allowing itself to just be caressed, touched, kissed, hurt, and then wow, then the relationships begin to change. Obviously, also letting go of I had a huge sense of like hyper privacy and I don't tell anybody
Mhm.
anything and I don't want anybody to know about my life. And then how could anybody ever even get to know me or be in relationship with me? And then just starting to practice. It also took practice. Like I remember conversations where I was like choking and I would like tear up, but I was like pushing myself, like just share the goddamn thing. Tell them that this
Mhm.
like it's dumb, but just do it. And then like letting go of the contractions in the throat, I started sharing, and then the heart kind of opening up, and then yeah, and then the field, the spaciousness getting wider, and then like the no self starts dissolving, and then the fuck, and then it almost feels like love becomes just this utter humanizing of the if human taken to be just like that you are the same, like it's completely the same.
Mhm.
So I'm like, it's almost the love you might have for yourself, you have it instantaneously and effortlessly for another person because the
Mhm.
all that
Yeah.
is this and the extreme intimacy of all this. Uh, and yeah, like I could feel the space closing or opening, whichever way you want to look at it, with the connection, with the relationship aspect of it, which I guess was one of my main driving forces to not feel like to hold somebody's hand and really kind of just be there, present with somebody as true self, which is no self and everything, and as them and as you, and this interpenetrating thing. Um,
That's love. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and it was like
Mhm.
it was all of a sudden, and then I mean gradual, and then all of a sudden, fuck. So, how has it
Mm.
been for you, this like heart journey aspect of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Nisargadatta had a really interesting quote. He said, "When I look within, I see nothing. When I look out, I see love. In between these two poles, my life dance, something like that." Yeah.
Mm.
So that's why the Buddhists would say that emptiness, which is the insight we've been discussing, the lack of inherency in the self or whatever, in phenomenons, and compassion or love is actually two sides of the same coin. Yeah, yeah, because once okay, in the beginning I said that mind training is life training, right? Because this cannot be separate from life at all, right? Once you create a separation between this and life, that's already a separation. But then what is life? Life is made up of a series of relationships, right? At the most like existential,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fundamental level of like, different infinite causes and conditions interpenetrating to create this reality to just a very normal, quote unquote, everyday conventional conversations, right? Different fractals of the same thing. What is life? But a string or strings of relationships coming together to create each of our experiences. So you cannot get away from relationships. Again, going back to what I said earlier, nothing in nature stands alone. Even if you go up to the mountains to live by yourself, that presupposes that there is whatever a world or a civilization that you're trying to get away from. Right? And people that are like enclosed in their own room, I'm pretty sure most of them would feel lonely and they want to connect, even if they started watching TVs or, start doing this or that, try to fulfill themselves. They're actually craving for human connections,
It's almost this
right?
idea
So
of when you're pushing something away, you're touching it.
yeah,
You're always in
yeah,
contact with it because to do
you're
this,
always in
I
contact.
have to touch.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Even going up to the mountains and live in a solitary life presupposes that you are already inseparable from that which you're trying to get away from, which is the rest of the world, right? Right. So I think that's one of the things that I'm also like just working on constantly because there's no end to working on being a better, you know, partner, being a better son, father, friend. That's the part of the unfoldment. Even after initial realization or initial awakening, that just would continuously unfold, right? Like that, working through and with or as relationships. So I would say in general, my relationships also got a lot better. But then the funny thing is, the more you can see how cause and condition arise, or those different afflictions that are causing frictions among individuals, the more sensitive you are. Actually, that's another paradox. It's like the clearer you can see, the
Yeah,
more
yeah.
sensitive you can become. Yeah, you have less suffering, but that doesn't mean you don't feel as pain anymore, right? You don't feel the intensity of emotion anymore. It doesn't mean that actually make you sometimes feel more intensive emotions. But then how do you navigate through that with this insight of emptiness? Now seeing that it's inseparable from love and relation. That's its own thing, right? That can be its own podcast. But then I will say that relationships cannot be ignored. In fact, like most of my work right now is how do you relate? How do I relate with people in my my contemplative CrossFit group, my meditation group, people in my Sangha, or how do I relate to people I'm doing podcasts with? How do I relate to like my girlfriends? Or how do I relate to my mom, my dad? Yeah, in a different way than before, because before you're relating with and through their conditionings, right? So like you have this conditioning you're not seeing,
Yeah,
but every
yeah.
time you relate to someone, you interact with someone, you are actually not interacting with them. you're actually interacting either with your own projection or your conditionings. Your stories is interacting and communicating with their condition and their stories. And then we just project our views and our identities and our obscurations and conditionings back and
Wait,
forth, back and forth. That's why we never get to the bottom of things, right? We can never truly love without seeing the non-separate nature of reality. We can never truly love. But even after we see through how all phenomena are empty of separation, right? That's another way to describe it. Empty of separation. There can be a challenge in how to relate with people from that place, which is part of the integration.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you had this experience? Because I actually literally had this very recently, where it's almost like when people are like kind of kind of open and expressing love, there it's like if there was this glimmer in their eye that feels like, oh, we're seeing each other. But the moment there's like some judgment from them towards you or whatever, it's
oh
almost
yeah, you can see it.
like you're lost
Yeah,
them, like you're not
yeah,
looking at
yeah,
me, like you're seeing over here
mhm,
and over here, but not
yeah,
like oh,
yeah,
and it's like wow, suddenly I feel not like a stranger, but there's this like oh, you're just seeing past me because I know if there's a judgment towards me, I know there's a judgment towards you. There's like a little contraction that's
yeah.
like
That
skewing the thing, and it's like uh, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah. Every judgment you have towards other people are judgments you have towards yourself.
absolutely,
Because
100%.
conditions are, mirrors, right? We're all codependent rising, right?
And I think
Yeah.
maybe there's this idea, I mean, this is a story framing of it, but why is it the case that we're humans roaming around? It's like, well, we've got these bunch of
Mm.
mirrors around so we can actually finish looking at
See
different
ourselves.
perspectives
Yeah,
because you've got your blind spot. And you might go in a
yeah,
cave and maybe really glimpse or really reach through true nature, but then suddenly something like you're being an asshole and you're like, what?
yeah,
And maybe that's part of the point of this, and it's not to both. I mean, sometimes isolation might be more helpful, and sometimes it's the collective thing, and it's this
yep,
flow in between. But maybe there's a point to having a bunch of fractal mirrors getting to call each
yeah,
other out and
totally.
say this and notice
Yeah,
that and seeing
totally.
how we react, so that we can keep refining that which is
Yeah,
and keep noticing and recognizing and resting in it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's why it's so important to have people around you
Mm.
to not just detach yourself completely from society. That again, like you said, there are phases where you need
Sure.
to de-escalate yourself from society a little bit, like going to a retreat. But then you got to come back down, to the world from the mountain if you want to integrate,
And I
because
think
a
it's
lot
like
of our afflictions. Hmm.
trusting like what
I was gonna
is.
say,
So the fact that loneliness comes up almost to everybody is like a
yeah,
pointer, like, hey, don't
yeah,
try to take that away. Like lean into what
yeah.
it's telling you and go towards people and wants connection.
Yeah, yeah, and also one really tricky part about this path is that you cannot see your own view actually. Like it's very difficult to see your own view because you are your view, right? Your view is not something that's intellectual actually, or it's not even a concept, or it's not even worldviews. All these are kind of trickle down from this broader view that you have, right? The view of reality, which is like this concavity or this dome or this geometry that
Yeah.
is your entire reality.
Yeah.
So you cannot see it, right? You're always going to have blind spots. So
Mm.
how do we see our own views? By interacting with other people. Yeah, it's only through the interaction with others that your afflictions get to expose themselves through, interactions and through friendships, through romantic partner. That's why a lot of people they can have a, well, who is this? Who said this? I think it's Ram Dass, or I forgot, but he said that if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family,
Family.
I think Dana Ingram said, if you want to see how enlightened I am, just ask my wife. It's like, those who are closest to you
Yeah.
would really allow you to see not just your own afflictions, but their afflictions as well. Right, right. It's because it's a relational thing. So I think a major part of the contemplative path is actually relationships at all different kinds of level, either relationship between a teacher and a student, relationship between people that you've never met, even between strangers, between your friends,
You
romantic
have a
partner.
relationship with yourself. You have
Yeah,
opinions
with
about you. Like
exactly
you
with
have a
yourself.
perspective about
Exactly.
you.
That's a really good one. Exactly. Because when we keep talking about, oh, this whole path is about changing your relationship to phenomenon, change your relationship to suffering, to resistance. You change your relationship to yourself. And you also change relationship with other humans. You change your relationship to relationship itself. Yeah, so we cannot get away from relationships. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why this compassion, love thing is just the other side of the coin is emptiness. But people can really skew towards one side, but not the other. Right,
Yeah.
right. We see this all the time in spiritual circles. They are too into like emptiness or non-duality, and they just ignore the human relations. And they don't know how to be like a friend. They don't know how to, be compassionate. They just are assholes. You can have an asshole who is awakened to the true nature of the experience, like initially. But then if you want to refine that realization further, you have to deal with emotions. You have to deal with the human stuff. And a lot of the human stuff is relationship, right? So,
Okay.
but
So
then
I
on the
think
other
there's
side of the extreme, people,
a useful distinction to make for people. So in terms of like meditation and awakening, and there, let's say there can be an awakening if we're defining awakening as that insight
seeing the emptiness, yeah,
into emptiness
insight, yeah.
through nature and all phenomena, and that doesn't necessarily require to have become a emotionally perfect being or be perfectly
Nope, nope,
ethical.
no, nope,
There is something
nope.
about some people might be more skillful with that insight than others and whatever, and may be able to cultivate that sort of attention in order to investigate and penetrate. And yet there's
Yep.
probably potentially still a lot of
A
clutter,
lot of
distractions
yeah,
and stuff.
noise.
So somebody that
Yep.
might see or be with true nature or as true nature doesn't necessarily mean it's a perfectly moral being that is perfectly equanimous and is loving and kind to
Yeah.
everybody.
Actually,
Um,
some people can like become even bigger assholes, actually, because they realize that, oh, actually, I'm not suffering 98% of the time anymore. And they can either verify the sense of like, oh, there is no morality, or like, oh, it's all empty anyway. I don't have to be a good person. No, there's no distinction between good and bad, good and evil. It's all the same, or like whatever. So there is a tendency to bypass, actually.
yeah,
But then you can't go further. That could be your limit, right?
yeah,
But the rest of the journey, the further integration has to take into account other human beings. Just because you see that others are empty, it doesn't mean that they don't exist, right? It's just because you see the self as empty, it doesn't mean that the self doesn't exist in relation to others who still feel pain, who still feel suffering. Like, how do you relate to these people?
yeah.
Yeah.
So like an experience I've had was at some point along this journey, it's like, wow, oh my God, so much suffering has feels so distant or so small or such a whisper. But then in my thinking of people, for example, I mean, I'm Venezuelan, and one of the things that's been the most like, is the political prisoners we have in Venezuela right now. So it's like right now somebody's being tortured. It's like, how do I relate to that? And then, yeah, you can sort of, there's some more cosmic views, and then that eases, like, it's all happening, unfolding this human story as we're all learning. And yet there was also a part that felt wrong, but like, wow, it's such a distance, and then like allowing myself to re-engage and hurt as I know the mother of that political prisoner might feel,
Mm.
and then to let that hit too, not because no, because now I'm upset. No, can I allow myself to also be hit by the sadness of somebody who doesn't have a
Mm.
perspective that allows them a cushion from which
Yep.
to rest that pain, but rather
Yep.
make it the whole uh like irreconcilable. It doesn't have any meaning and it's just can I like slip into that to like let it hurt? Let me allow myself to hurt so I can relate from a real
Yeah.
like presence because and then I'm sure it's a dance. It's not always to wallow in that, but also never to be in it. Like, and you'll find I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody has their own dance, but like if I feel myself disengaged, like no, let me let these things hit and hurt so I can then because then if I'm gonna go talk to somebody or even know what might be helpful for them in that moment, like to really experience that pain allows you to then know how to be present for somebody because you've touched that.
Exactly.
So it's this dance between like the fullness of this content, which there is suffering and there are people like going through things while also being able to be a container in space
Be
because
that space that goes
be a
beyond,
space.
that holds everything. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
because if
that's
not,
a good point. Explaining what we talked about earlier about the flexibility of aggregations again is the
yeah,
flexibility of view, right? It's like, okay, at first you're just a self, and now there's no self, and now there's others too again. So can you be the one, which is, the one and the many? You can aggregate as different beings, feel their thoughts and think their feelings simultaneously while being neither. So
and,
that's the flexibility of view again. Yeah, yeah.
and you notice it in the moment. Oh, there's a resistance to wanting to feel like that pain again. Oh, what's that about? Oh, is there a little afraid of hurt? Then let me lean into it and let me experience it. Wow, it
But
washes off.
sometimes it is important to like detach from all of it too, just to allow some contraction to resolve by itself. But then sometimes it's more useful to just be yourself and relate to others from the perspective of yourself. Other times it's more crucial and more useful to relate as them first and foremost,
Yeah.
and then experience it also. And then can you do both?
Yeah.
Neither of them. Yeah.
Have you come to find this? To me, one thing that definitely seems to be an upgrade is well, I guess because the thing I probably practiced the most was on the emotional territory, like let things hit and just like free dive into them. And then like, wow, as less and less friction is in the system, when oh, here's a swelling of an emotion, like when you let it, it's like it takes 7 seconds for like the thing to wash over. Like when you weep and just let it was almost like 10 seconds after, I can't even say I
Mhm.
suffered because it was just like this almost empty energetic thing that went like in the moment, maybe it was like, ugh, but then it's so gone. So it's like the more you can like frictionlessly let it run through you. It's like, whoosh, and it washed
Mhm.
past.
Yeah.
So it just like did its thing for 7 seconds, 3 seconds, maybe 15. If there was something that sort of got accumulated, some generalized sadness about, I mean, I'll bring it up again, but oh, Venezuela, this happened. Like, oh, there was this general sense of sadness. And so like it's almost the more you like, I guess in dream, oh, we talk about dreams, but like there's the monster. At some point, you can just go towards the monster and, whoop, and then it dissolves. But if you keep running away from the thing, it'll keep
Yeah.
being there. So this,
Yeah.
wow, when there's enough space in the system to just like, oh, let that thing run, whoop, and it's out. Like it's
Mhm.
so much easier or pleasant or
To
manageable to
deal with. Yeah.
emotions
Yeah.
and this thing because oh let it wash through. There's no preference. No, these I'm fine with. This one, no, no, no. This one too. Oh, this is the
Mhm.
experience of the difficulty to experience. Okay, fine. Let that be as it is, and it's that paradox or like once you surrender to it, then it ended up being lighter just because you went so fully like, all right, I'm gonna feel the thing to its. Oh, that was it. It's like
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
I
one.
think there's like a skill in how to navigate through difficult emotions. All right, right. So you neither want to resist nor do you want to not resist. So neither resistance nor non-resisting. So if you, like you say, if you run away from it, it's just going to be suppressed or it's just going to be manifested at a future time, right? But then if you grasp onto it too hard, and that's the other side of the extreme, right? But then can you be with it without clinging
Yeah,
onto it, without identifying with it? Neither are you trying to dissociate or run away from it. Sometimes it is useful to completely
sure.
detach. Okay, that's fine. Flexibility. Sometimes it is cool to just go into it
Yeah,
directly, even be the emotion. And then sometimes you can have the flexibility to play with the, gradients of contraction, expansion,
yeah,
dissociation, or creating a lot of distance versus just being the sensation, or even grasp onto it. That's fine too. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But then your mind has to recognize this is the maneuver that you're making.
yeah.
Then you're fine because as long as there is a awareness, as long as there is a recognition, the coherence arise by itself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful and wise and important point, though. There's no fixed point. It should always be right in the middle of the no because it moves and
But
some
even that, yeah, even that's an insistency. That's a fixed view too. Oh, we should
because
be in the middle. Yeah,
and
yeah,
especially speaking of like emotions, like for sure sometimes like no, create distance because if it's a lot of
yeah.
trauma or something, like no, don't let me go explore it. Sometimes take 3 weeks to just not be with it and then slowly like it's a flex. It's not like you should always be in the middle point of
Mm,
feeling and not feel like no, sometimes
yeah, yeah.
whatever
It's a
is arising.
flexibility.
And if
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is if there's a sense of overwhelming now, cool, step back and then let it come down and then lean in towards it and you'll
And you can actually apply just that one way of maneuvering through like emotions or obscurations to everything else, to your own thoughts too, right? Right. Sometimes you want to be identified with thoughts. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes you want to create a distance with your thoughts, right? So, but then again, that presupposes that you have at least some initial insight into the nature of experience or the nature of reality being empty of inherent existence. Otherwise, there's always going to be a tendency towards either grasping or uh, dissociating, right? The Buddha said like the craving to become, you want to sustain something that feels good. The craving to become, you want to sustain this mystical state. You want to sustain the separate self, craving to become, and the craving to not become. I want to annihilate the self. I want to not look at my sensations. I want to annihilate my traumas. I want to dissolve every aspect of the self. Those two views are both extreme views. Not that they can't be there, but can you see how those two extreme views, not only are they codependent rising, but again, including but is uh, transcendent. What you truly are includes but transcend these both of these views. Yeah, and then with that flexibility, you can apply that to anything. That's why I think a lot of this work is kind of like doing parkour of consciousness, the way I call it. You're just like, you're doing parkour with the mind, like, but the reality is the obstacle course, right? When you sit down to meditate, you create kind of like a simulation of an obstacle course that whatever you have right now that you're sitting down, there's always some kind of obstacle, some obscurations to work through. But then when you go on to life, there's the obscurations and the obstacles of life. But if you can maneuver through the obstacles in a simulation, like a meditation sit, cocoon into this, okay, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a retreat, you, if the practice is working, it should carry over to off the cushion training, which is you are always constantly maneuvering through the obstacles of life itself. So we're constantly doing parkouring. So we're not shining away from the obstacles because the obstacles is what's creating the freedom, right? You want to find freedom within and as the restraints. You want to wake up through with and as the conditionings, neither trying to like dissolve the conditionings nor dissociating from the conditioning or not looking at distancing. So that's the maneuver. But then you need to train, right? You need to have the fitness and put in the reps in order to do this because like CrossFit trainers, right? We call our club contemplative CrossFit. Like even when you do MMA of the mind, that's another one. You do MMA or when you do parkour, you have to train, right? You have to do squats, the basic stuff. The squats would be like, maybe counting the breath. You have to like do yoga, different kind of training in order to just spontaneously, you know, flow through life, even in the midst of like resistances. And that's again going back to the beginning. In formal sitting practice still are necessary, but then you have to do those practices through the right view. Otherwise, you might be reinforcing your old patterns, even if you think you're making progress on the spiritual path. So that's also something that's really important to really just to be aware of, even from the start.
Mm.
In my practice of meditation, to reinforce my old patterns, to feel good for a while, to like reinforce the spiritual self. Right? Am I just turning spirituality into another thing to grasp onto, another shiny object, the different jhanas, different mystical experiences? They can just be another shiny object, right? This teacher, that teacher, this teaching. Am I just reinforcing my old condition? Now, like you said, the story has been transferred from whatever CEO or artist or bodybuilding to now the spiritual self, right?
Sure.
Do,
Well,
do you see that?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What
If you do, then
what
you
would
can
you
engage in all kinds
say?
of practices. Yeah.
How do you view? I think because this is also a very I say common question, the things that people when I put that video for people to ask questions, like the relationship between meditation and let's say spirituality in a very broad, like energetic experiences, entities,
Mm,
speaking to entities, Kundalini awakening, mystical, that whole range of speaking with or access to past lives,
mm.
anything tarot cards, astrology, that wide gamut of spirituality. Just how would you kind of place these two things together in terms of like meditation? Does that give you access to these things? Is it something other? Is it something complementary to? Is it inevitable? Does it open, how do you view that?
I think when people want to meditate for the character, again, like there's a bunch of different things you could improve on, right? Right. Self-improvement stuff, I guess, right? Or the self-help stuff. Meditation will definitely help with these things, right? More focus, discipline, emotional regulation, and more compassion. Even compassion is kind of like still belongs to the character in a bit,
Mm,
or less stress, or all these different kind of things, like becoming more intelligent, right? More creative. All that stuff is still belonging to the content, the character, right? The self, right? But again, we're not trying to annihilate the self, so it's okay to do these things. But if that's the only thing you are doing, then there's still going to be suffering, right? Because all these things again are conditioned phenomenons, right? But then
mm,
with awakening, you are actually seeing through to the nature of the self. You deconstructing the self and seeing how the self is aggregated, how the self is constructed, and then eventually you see how the entire reality is constructed because your mind is all encompassing, right? So they're not separate at all, but you can do one without the other, but eventually they're going to really start to relate to each other. In terms of like experiences with like I don't know entities or other dimensions, um, powers, like I don't know, giving transmissions and all
yeah.
that stuff, tarot cards, lucid dreaming, they are still also just belonging to the realm of, I guess you can just say realm of experiences. So they still belong to the content, right? So Shizhen Yang actually has a two axes of development. One is the vertical one. You go straight down to the nature of reality, the
Yeah.
nature of mind, right? Just penetrate through emptiness.
Yeah.
The other axis, the x-axis,
Sure.
is stuff of content, like
Yeah, yeah.
the
Uh,
dream stuff, right.
Okay, yeah. In fact, there was something I was thinking when I was thinking of talking that we were going to speak. I'm like, the way it feels, and I guess it's
Mm.
exactly that. One feels vertical, like, okay, it's just
Yeah,
flat
yeah,
and emptiness.
yep.
And in that process, other things open up, but it feels
Yeah,
horizontal.
other things open up. Yeah.
Oh, within this space, because you loosen some ontologies, it seems to be the case that some
More
this
possibility
energy.
opens up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like oh, energy stuff, or like maybe I did hear something, and it's just like because you've just loosened ontologies, then that yeah, all right, that seems to be part of things that unfold, but it's still within this horizontal, and it's
Yeah.
just like more things to be curious about, and they can go really deep. They can be very profound, wise, depending how you define wisdom. If you define wisdom as just seeing true nature, then maybe not in that sense, but if you in this human sense, like yeah, you can get insight into yeah, what's going on, what's unfolding, but it feels horizontal within this thing. And then there's just the thing that cuts across. Because then, yeah, the moment you ask that blissful orgasm with final divinity unity with Shiva, what was that made out of and where was it? Like, you can
Yeah,
still like,
exactly.
what is the difference between the smell of broccoli and that unifying orgasm? Like, they're
Yeah.
both happening as they are
Or
in
poop
permanent.
and God, that's my favorite analogy.
Which one? Poop and God?
Poop and God, right? Can you find
Yeah,
the nirvana in the samsara? That's the whole thing
exactly.
about, collapsing the two truths, right? And like there's two truths. One is the conventional truths, right? Relative truths, the truths of like the character, the truths of this world, but then there is also the ultimate truth, which is the nature of phenomena, right? But then the two
And then coming
truths
back.
also are not separate. Yeah, then coming back, right? They're coming back and seeing that nirvana and samsara, form and emptiness, love and emptiness are also not separate, right? So I think the danger is like people get too trapped in experiences,
Hmm.
right? They would go through the spiritual path and maybe they start to reify or substantialize these mystical experiences or even powers.
Okay.
Um,
I think that's
they can get lost.
it's the
Taking
thing.
psychedelics again and again. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's like if we take appearance and emptiness, I mean, Lung Chengpa for me was like, ah, so it's such clear formulation of this. So if we just take appearance and emptiness, clearly what seems to be the case is we're very familiar with appearance. That's the immediate thing that
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
caught up in.
Yeah.
I'm bored. I live in this country. I'm doing these things. Like we're very good at noticing appearance. That's not, you don't, it's effortless. Here I am. Here's a face. You're looking at it. You're hearing my words. Things are happening. We're really good at that. The tricky
Yeah.
thing of this path seems to be like, can you see through that? And then once you've
See
that,
through.
now it's both. Now it's like
Yeah.
clearly this is still something, although it's also no
Yeah.
thing. But that one's easy. It's automatic. It's what we're trained since birth. The other
Yeah.
one is like this tricky thing. So it's like until seeing that, we're still
Mm.
with the appearance of the contents of experience.
Yeah, yeah, we're still like trapped in the cycle of samsara, right? If you don't see through the nature of all experiences, you can very easily start to be identified with your mystical states, or even with the experience of like no self or anything in that regard can be a trap of its own if you don't see through the true nature of experience. But I think on the other side of that too, it's like if you only focus on yeah, we talked about appearance. If you only focus on appearance without seeing the true nature, that could be a trap. But if you only focus in on emptiness,
Yeah.
that can be a trap too, because the danger is using awakening to, bypass, say, emotional development or relationships or, I don't know, getting a job, right? A lot of people, they call them like dharma bums. They would just not get a job because they think this is how spirituality should look like. But then they're not very functional. Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah.
As long as you recognize that's part of your tendency, it's fine. That's your choice. It's your life, right? But I'm just saying, like, there is a danger in only going for the wisdom axis without trying to integrate all the
Yeah.
phenomenons on the y-axis, right? So ideally, you want to, create calmness and stability in order to see the insight. Which then, if you see the insight, the character, right, the mind, the relativistic mind would become more chill, even if you're like, you're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
like
No, I love
resting
that.
restlessness,
I
right? So
really,
eventually, these two things are also like co-arising and they reinforce each other, right? So awakening creates wisdom, right? But then the wisdom also would penetrate through all of the relative domains of like, I don't know, relationship, romance, sex, getting a job, becoming a better CEO, becoming a better, all of that would have to be penetrated if you want like a fully integrated realization, right? So embodiment, oh, I guess we can call that embodiment, integrates all these different axes all together. Yeah.
hmm,
Yeah. So ideally that's where you want to be. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. I'm just gonna say it again, that what you said, because I love it. And I think just for people and for me too, it's like that even just thinking about meditation, where it's like there's an axis of it where
Mm,
you can be improving that which you want to improve. So like sustained attention, like I'm reading a book and I can't focus. Let me meditate and
mm,
then I can read 100 pages without getting distracted. Sure. Or this anxiety and now I can have more space and handle my emotions better and I'm improving these aspects of my life. I get to be less reactive when somebody insults me and now, oh, I can actually not react as immediately. Like these things that are improvements in our day-to-day functioning, in our humanity, in our relationships. And that's one aspect that meditation can do, and it can do, and that can be somebody's focus and intention. And then there's this other aspect, which is going through that and seeing into true nature of reality, which is its own thing. It's actually seeing what all those experiences and phenomena that seem to arise by themselves are at a fundamental nature. Like
yeah,
what is the
the substance of it,
what is
the
the
substance of
nature of
substance.
that?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
one aim of meditation or emphasis or one's result can be just improving this character, the person that you are, and creating things that are more pleasant, better experiences. And then there's an investigative part that is actually just penetrating what is all of that? Who
Yeah.
am I really? And
Mhm.
you made a really important distinction, which I think will be helpful for people if you're asking like, but if your life is fine, why even be interested in that kind of awakening or that awakening? And you said it, you can improve a lot of things about your life, be less reactive, and be able to read for longer because you can concentrate more. But there will always be some suffering because you haven't really seen that which
Yeah.
is that which you are, which is all. So if there's any incentive to investigate in that direction, it would be that there will all still be some lingering of suffering because by definition, almost inherently in that dual division, separation is suffering. So until that is seen through, it,
Yeah.
sure, and I mean, I guess that's everybody's choice. How much do you want to keep going, or like you're satisfied with this level of suffering? And that I think is also fine. Of like, yeah, I don't need to go further along this path, but at least that you're now people are aware. Like, well, there is a place where you can get where like you're seeing through experiences and
Mhm.
emotions through what they really are for themselves, and at least if I were to say something on a more personal level, I would say that wow, you end up knowing yourself so much more fully because of course, how can you know the character or you just know the character, but that which is, which you are, which all is, to know that, then it's like now you're fully yourself in a way, or like not fully as something ultimate that now got it, but relative to prior, like, oh my God, this openness and this spaciousness and this thing that now like does this, there is like a beauty in not negating the character or the person you've been. It's
Mhm.
almost like a rediscover who you've always been. It's like
Yeah, who you always
accumulate
been. Exactly.
contractions and on the psychological human level, we talk about this all the time. We're like, as a kid, I used to dance on top of tables, and then as a teen, I got embarrassed by that, and then
Yeah.
I'm not spontaneous and I'm like rigid, and then eventually you get through your shit enough where like I can dance again in front of people and not feel weird. Like we're trying to regain that, which was always the case. So in a
Yeah.
way, like seeing through true nature, there's like apparently sort of this opening where like you both this that contracted sense of
Both the
self is
self
gone, and
and not the
yet
self.
and now
Yeah.
it can fully also just
I can
be
fully.
and everything can blossom moment to moment. It's like everything can blossom and exhaust itself, which includes you and your personality and your idea like this that
Hmm.
happens. It blossoms and it exhausts itself, and it's almost like your enjoyment in life will be as the less friction you put on that. Like if there's more friction, sure, it's still gonna be going
Yeah.
as it needs to go, but I almost view it as like if you have a solid object, like I don't know, so and you've got the wind, the cosmic wind, or like that which is flowing, it's gonna push it in the direction it needs to go and whatever. But it's heavy. But if you have something like a plastic bag, it's just doing this, and it's almost you can see the shape of the wind through the plastic bag at the end because they're synonymous. You are the wind, you are that which is moving through you. But now I can just do this, and sometimes it goes faster, sometimes slower, but it's just allowing that to run through, and then it ends up somehow also aligning with the story of your life, or like, oh, I ended up wanting to be a filmmaker, and this
Mhm.
is coming out of you because this is the way it's unfolding, but you're just like, and sometimes that wind is like, no, you huddle down a bit more, and sometimes like, you let it go. But if it's always just solid and contracted, I mean, it'll push you where you need to go, but your subjective experience might feel a bit more unpleasant and suffering and heavy rather than, yeah, just this openness that can just let it do what it wants to do and you just kind of let it in a way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like one of my favorite analogy is like, okay, there seemed to be a progression even in the process of waking up. One of the analogy that it can be quite confusing if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's like more into film, right? It's like moving from like 720 to like 1080 in terms of like resolution to like 4K and then like 8K 360. But then it's always been like quote unquote 8K 360. But then you can tap into that AK 360 immediately. Like that's why people go to masters and they point out to the nature of mind, right? Point you out to the nature of mind. Even say like AK 360 is saying too much. But anyway, that's just an analogy of like, okay, there seems to be this progression. But once you are pointing it to the nature of mind, once you recognize the nature of mind to be just this, then like your character, your nervous system would align itself to true nature. So
Mm.
this progression can be a spontaneous unfoldment and integration to truth, or you can be the other way around. You can slowly maybe start to like do practices where you slowly clean up the obscurations and slowly start to see reality at a clear level where you increase the resolution of your perception, or both sides. So it's like, yeah, there is a progression, but then there is also a non-progression that will result in what seemed like a progression toward more awakening. Yeah, I don't know that makes sense, but that could be applied to everything on the relative level that we're talking about, right? Right? It's like, okay, the two truths, right? The relative truth of you as a personality would change. You would change. I mean, most people, after they go through a awakening, their personality, how they relate with the world, even the structure of their nervous system can be altered, right? How much that alters depends on from one individual to the next. But then you are going to be given a much more efficient, like body, mind, nervous system. But on the relative level, that which is always the case, that cannot be approved upon, cannot be added to or subtracted from, that's always there. But then recognizing that would, realign your nervous system. But then you can also do work intentionally to improve the self, right? But what I'm saying, you need both sides, because if you only do things to improve the self and not seeing the true nature of experience, it's very easy to get trapped in a relative world of samsara, right? You can endlessly trying to purify without seeing that, wait, actually, whatever you're trying to purify is already awake and luminous. I don't know if that makes sense. So for most
Yeah,
people, they're
yeah.
coming
'Cause
from both
on
sides.
the path, it seems like you're going and eliminating stuff, and now it's getting refiner, and then slowly, phoop,
There is
oh,
that process. There is
and,
that process. But at the same time,
and phoop.
it's also about seeing how everything is already perfect. Even the imperfection or the holes that you're speaking of is completely full. There's no gap anywhere, right? So sometimes you got to go from this side, sometimes from this side. Sometimes they converge. But then if you're
Yeah,
really seeing the full picture,
it's
the
almost
relationship
like
between emptiness and form,
the i-
they're
the idea that we
reinforcing
have,
each other.
the idea that we have, like, if this is still present or existing, I'm not there yet, which in a certain framework, that's nonsensical because anything that
Mm.
is within
It's
the
already that too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
so,
already
but if that's here, then I'm haven't really reached. It's like anything that could be and is always that which is. So it can never be the but I mean, I just have to remember. Of course, it felt like no, I'm trying to purify and like get to things, and it becomes like more rarefied air about the, and then like oh, it was the whole thing. Any impatience is to say what like how is that any different from like this peaceful, spacious like it's all nature. It's all
Yeah,
reality.
it's all nature. It's all nature. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think I'm going to make one last point
Yeah.
about this from the perspective of ethics and morality, actually, because a lot of people do practice spirituality, and they have this view of like, I can't eat meat, I can't have
Oh,
sex, I
sure.
have to like, renounce all that stuff, right? That's also belonging to the character, right? That's also belonging to the y-axis of content. But we do need that for most of us, right? That's why you go on a Goenka retreat, you don't eat meat. You don't eat meat not because there's anything inherently wrong with eating meat, because once you think that there's anything wrong with eating meat, then you're creating that separation again between like purity and impurity. You have an idea or an insistency of what spirituality should look like. It should look like my version of purity, which is this and that, right? But ultimately speaking, there is no separation, right, between good and evil, purity and impurity. But like I said, we do sometimes need to de-escalate, right? Because let's say if a diet is like terrible your entire life, how are you going to create a stability of the mind to even see the inside? So, hey, let's try 10 days vegetarian diet. And then your mind becomes more calm. And then you can use this calm, stabilized mind to see the inside. But again, once you start to attach your identity to not eating meat, again, There's a separation again. Same with like being selfless, right? Or being compassionate. They are the byproduct of recognizing true nature, sure. But then on one hand, you can also kind of play the role or meme the role of a compassionate person in order to de-escalate from you being an asshole
Yeah.
your entire life,
Mm.
to clear out some of the obscurations and entanglement, right? So you started to maybe, you know, give you some money to charity or start to just like say I love you, just as a part of the practice to de-escalate, repattern
Yeah.
your mind, so you can have the stability of the mind to
Yeah.
see the inside, to see even that being compassionate is also empty. But again, you don't want to come just from one side, right? You don't want to just be like, oh, from the beginning, morality, who cares? You can just eat whatever. I can just keep on having sex and drinking alcohol like 7 days a week, and I will be able to see the inside so empty anyway. But you're lying to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because well, some geniuses might be able to do that, but most people,
Yeah. Maybe
like
some
an alcoholic,
adventurous prodigy.
probably just before he even gets on the inside path, he probably just needs to be sober for like 2 weeks, a month, or whatever, in order to just repattern himself from that like really thick condition of like drinking every day. Because you don't have the stability of the mind or even the energetic clearance to even see the true nature of reality. Sure, it's always here. It's in the drunkenness, sure, but you can't see it. It's there, but if you can't see it, there's no use.
Yeah,
Does that
it's
make
like
sense? Yeah.
if you're deprived from sleep, oh, pay attention for 5 minutes, you're gonna doze off just because literally you can't like have the energy to do it. And I think also with like the ethical stuff, yes, there might be some prodigious stuff that whoop, and they just went there with all the clutter inside and just saw through.
But then
But
eventually they have to integrate all that stuff too. That's what
yeah,
I'm saying. It's like even if you can see it right away because of like,
then
your disposition or the cause and condition is just in the right place. The part of you that are cluttered because you're acting against the harmony of society
yeah,
has to be resolved, looked at, a process, right? Because like ethic is not inherently a thing,
yeah.
but then can you live in harmony with your fellow human beings? If you can, there's going to be resistance, and those resistance would obscure true
Mm,
nature, right? It's not like so it's not like so imagine, okay, if I just tell a person who just have a normal sense of reality on the street, hey, let's go to a Vipassana retreat, all right, and then go rob a bank or go steal something from your mom before the retreat. He's going to be thinking about that a lot during the retreat. He
yeah,
wouldn't be able to have the stability of the mind to
yeah,
investigate the insight into the
yeah,
true nature of all
true.
experience. So for that person, it's probably a good idea to
Yeah.
not do anything shady before the retreat. So don't do anything shady in your life that would create this harmony in your life. That would cultivate a stability of the mind in order to investigate the insight.
And
Does that make sense? Yeah.
people can try this right now. Sit down for 5 minutes, try to pay attention to the breath. And if you keep having thoughts of, I should
Something you did that's shady, you're being an asshole to your
look,
like coworkers like 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
it's coming up for a reason. And I think I, I I'll say this. I wonder what your perspective is on this. Sort of the way I've kind of framed or viewed it is like what comes up naturally on its own tends to be like just pay attention to that. If right now it's guilt about the thing, be with the guilt rather than like let me force it inside it. Maybe sometimes, but um to kind of be with what is. And it seems to be the case that the systems that we are and the composition that we have, like once there's clarity, like the heart will tug at some things. Like if you just a baby and you just slap it in the face and like whatever, like it seems like the natural thing. Like something will kind of contract, and then when you investigate it, then you might feel
Yeah.
guilt about it and just be with it. So it's like there's it. I don't want to get too speculative, but as if there's like some orientation. Like once you're seeing through things and you allow yourself to be with them, it kind of tends to incline towards what we call ethical and
Yeah.
harmonious
Virtue.
behavior, just because it seems to like okay, keep doing this, and like this
Yeah.
keeps coming up. Like okay,
Exactly.
you just be with it, and then it's almost as if pleasure and displeasure are pointers. That's the cosmic pointers to saying like when you act lovingly to somebody and just not because you want the thing, you are just our presence, this loving texture of
You want
like
to create more harmony.
it
Yeah.
just feeds
More
on. So like, oh
harmony.
my God, what other game is there in town than to just spread love? Like that's and then you get every song. It's like all you need is love, and oh my God, that's what this was all talking about. But there seems to like if there was some inclination of like, yes, you've got emptiness and love, but that's why in terms of like because I get this view where it could be like impurity is a duality that we're creating it, and yet somehow yeah it's like there's this natural inclination towards harmony that happens, which
Yeah.
sort of seems to be the case, and but then you can't go beyond like but why is that and was like I don't know, it's just somehow there's this. once there's openness, it's like you just want to. It's better.
Yeah,
Though
because I think as
you could
a
do the other thing, and you could literally kind of run the experiment of let me go against that and see what arises
yeah,
and be with what is.
yeah,
That's still part of the thing, and like and that sense of you that's challenging and being competitive with the thing and wants to like put it to the that's another thing that's arising and wants to exhaust itself.
yeah,
Apparently,
yeah, you could work. Yeah, you could work through that too as part of your practice. Right? That's why there's no one way of doing things because
yeah.
even a lot of like tantric practices, they would tell their students to do something that is completely against what they think is moral. So, for example, a Vajrayana teacher might tell you to, hey, sleep with a hooker or drink a bunch of alcohol. If you come from the view that, oh, having hookers or drinking alcohol is bad, in order to repattern that, he will tell you to do what you think is pure and do its opposite. But that's different for everybody, right? But then once you
Well,
cling on to that
just to note, I'm glad you used those examples because we could go
yeah.
into a slippery slope of actually creating suffering for others rather than those were just unethical views. Like, but you're not causing suffering to a hooker or causing.
That's why you have to be really careful. Yeah,
Yes,
because
that's
yeah,
why.
exactly. Yeah.
And I
You
just
don't
want
want
to
to
point out because
bypass
if
either.
anybody's hearing this, okay, let me go inflict suffering or harm, but rather
Yeah.
things that might seem unethical or that there's some perspective that this is a no-no, but
Hmm.
without causing suffering and seeing what that does to the system. Okay, I'm gonna,
Yeah.
do a
Yeah,
thing.
totally. But I think ultimately it is to arrive at a space where everything is coherent and
Yeah.
in harmony, right? So we're social creatures, right? We, as mammals, as biological organisms, we're not discarding our biology. We are social creatures. That's the main reason why we survive as a species. We collaborate, right?
That's why we're
So there
talking right
is
now.
a natural inclination. Exactly. Yeah. So there's a natural inclination to live in harmony, right? But that harmony can look differently through different contexts. So ethics, you can't discard ethics if you want to live in a harmonious society, right? But at the same time, ethics is also contextual. You don't want to hang on to a specific form of ethic either, because then that can create its own resistance and contradiction. So it's very flexible. Then it's very context dependent, this whole path.
Yeah.
So there's not just like
Well,
one way. Oh, if you eat meat, you're not going to get enlightened, right? You have to like abstain from sex. Otherwise, you can't be, for one person, is you actually have to go watch more porn to de-escalate your attachment to what you think is pure. So it's different for everyone. And so is the practice. Different practice, different that would operate differently on your nervous system in different phases of your path, right? So there's a lot of different variations. So I think it's like one thing to take away is like there's no one way to, do this thing. There's no one way. Just there is so many different ways because we are so different, right? Because that's one of the modern conditionings, right? So we have to find the answer, the fastest way to assure. It's like the six-pack shortcut thing, right? It's like a cookie cutter program. It's like
yeah.
we always looking for the fastest way to this or that, right? Right. The fastest way to enlightenment now becomes the thing. Before it's like, oh, okay, six-pack shortcut, or like the fastest way to become more masculine, or the fastest way to make $1 million. But that obscuration is what's keeping you from
Yeah.
being flexible, which is what reality is, right? Reality is an infinite shapeshifter. Yeah.
It's inconceivable. Uh, nice, man. I think I'll end with um I guess what's again been super useful for me, and I just think this is so like because I think the majority of people and like the conversations I'm having is so like emotional and emotion leaning with suffering
Mm.
that I'll do right now which it was just taking emotions as the object of meditation, what it is right now. So I'll do that like in real time right now. Like what's coming out of me right now to express to you, Frank. Like I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you because like I feel a little like fluttering of excitement. I mean, there's a lot of space, but the fluttering of excitement to just have this conversation, speak so freely, to be able to use all this language, and I everything is just landing, and you're like that I don't have to explain anything. I say a word and you're like getting it, and the sense of like camaraderie, understanding feels very like just very enjoyable. It's just very enjoyable and nice. So thank you for like allowing me access to you in a way. Like we DM'd and you answered back and even want to do this call because honestly exciting in a way, and to relate to the world from this is beautiful every moment. But of course, with somebody who has certain language and can speak from that experience too, there's a sense of like kinship I feel, and it's just super exciting and lovely, when you relate to somebody because they like the same music or the same thing. obviously
Yeah.
this has a flavor of the whole thing because it's the and yet it's also just another thing, like music is the thing, but of
Yeah,
course
yeah.
there's this
That's it.
sense of like
I know exactly
fuck
what you
to
mean.
to you know through your eyes and see me and you and it's like yes that yes that
Yeah.
is super wonderful. So thank you, man. This is like
It's like
awesome.
the headless way, right? Do you know the headless way practice? Like we, as a matter of direct experience, we
Yeah,
can never see our head or our
sure.
face. But guess what? My face and my head is yours in a sense because the only reason why I have a head is through the empty, quote unquote, empty space that you are. So we neither of us have a head from one perspective, but because we don't have heads, we give each other our head, receiving and be received. Yeah. So whoever's watching this too, right? It's like, oh, can you really find your face or your head? You've never seen your head. The only
Uh,
time or the only chance you can see your head is either through photographs or through mirrors.
yeah,
But as a matter of direction, there's no
yeah.
head here.
Yeah, there's
What's
always
in your place?
there's
Huh?
subtle pointers everywhere that we don't notice.
Yeah.
Also, although careful with the language, like whoever, if somebody clips this, we're not saying we all give each other head because that would be totally different. That would be a totally different
So
thing.
it's just like investigating the space instead of a head. What you have is the whole world. You have this boundless space where the whole world is, and then in that world, there's the heads of other people.
Mm.
So that's like one really quick way to tap into like emptiness and love. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
actually, I remember reading about the headless wave, and I was thinking about
I
it,
love
like,
that headless
oh,
way. It's very
of
direct.
course,
Yeah.
it's a good pointer. But before, I literally couldn't grasp it. I'm like, what?
Yeah, because then you're imagining what's like to have no head, but you have to see it directly. I've never
Yeah,
seen a
yeah.
head.
It was like okay,
Yeah.
and the screen,
But
and
I see your head, conventionally your head and everything else. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
But thank you too for allowing me this opportunity.